Then I would like to call the Concord School Committee meeting to order, and I will note that we are being recorded and broadcast. Go to call the regional meeting to order.
Push this.
Yeah, no, just speak. Just speak.
I call the regional meeting to order.
There we go. Welcome, everyone. It's fun to have some students here. Glad that we have some people who have joined us tonight. First thing on the order of business, as always, is public comments. Did we have any public comments there? No. Okay, we had a comment come in through correspondence. I'm not sure if she actually wanted us to read it out loud, and I haven't heard back on that yet. So I will just, yeah, you're right. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I'll wait for correspondence. Just highlight it there. Then we get to go right to recognitions. We have some members of the high school band here, and I'm going to let Lori do the introduction.
I'm really going to turn it over to David Gresco, who's their leader. They had hoped to come and share some of their trip to Japan last spring, and I think talk to us on some things going forward. And we're just glad to have you here. We've been trying for a while to get you here, so I'm glad we finally found a date that worked. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Come on up here.
Come on up.
Cindy, can you turn one of those or any of those mics on?
No.
Let's see if any of them will work for us.
First of all, thank you very much for
Welcome.
inviting us and allowing us the opportunity to share a little bit about the trip that we experienced last year. We took 57 students and 12 adults halfway around the world for 11 days, and we had an amazing time. We've invited some students here to talk about their experiences here tonight. So I just have a few things to share first, a couple pictures, kind of an overview of the trip, and then I'll turn it over to the students. So as you can see, we had quite a big delegation that attended the trip, and for those who are not familiar, I think everybody is, we have a long-standing tradition and relationship with our sister city of Nanai in Hokkaido, Japan, as well as the sister school relationship that's been going on for well over 2 decades now. So in this picture, we have all of our students. We have a lot of our town officials from Nanai that helped us on the ground as we were doing all of our experiences. So this is one of our first pictures we took all together. And this is atop Mount Hakodate, which apparently is one of the most photographed spots in Japan, apparently. I don't know if that's still true, but I'm sure it's at least top 5, but it's very pretty, as you can see, scenic spot, and we had a perfect evening to enjoy that. It really feels like you're on top of the world. It really was a great, we only spent an hour up there, but really was a great time to kind of get some nervous energy out, so it was fun. Our trip, we talked about the 4 dimensions of our trip: intellectual, cultural, personal, and musical. So we got a lot of experience in all those. You'll hear about some of those here tonight. But we did some Zazen meditation, which was amazing because we had 70 people in a very small temple. It was just amazing experience. You might hear a little bit about that tonight. Some of the students participated in some kimono. A couple of them here tonight. You might be able to recognize them. And we had students participate in taiko drumming. I'll just play a little bit. Hopefully it won't be too loud. I'll turn it down. I will. That goes on and on, but they spent a couple hours rehearsing some songs and presented them in a little mini concert. Students got to pick from a variety of cultural experiences throughout the trip. Let's see. Okay, and our music was of course a big part of this trip. We performed 3 big concerts while we were in Japan, and the biggest one, we were most proud of, was the Friendship concert. It was a 3.5 hour concert with the Nanai High School Band, as well as the 3 junior high bands in the area. And this picture is actually the front page of the Nye Town magazine for May, so we made the front page. So it's a beautiful colored magazine. It's really impressive. So there's a nice article in the middle about the band's visit. So really neat picture. I hope we can get that framed and put it up in the band room sometime. This is, as you can see, the Friendship Concert. This is the 5th time the concert band has visited Japan. So the Friendship Concert was established 20 years ago. 1998 was the first Friendship Concert. So it's quite a tradition. They might even use the same banners for all I know. But packed house, just a really appreciative audience, and all of the town came out to see it. So it was really neat. So all the students felt very welcome. We had I won't take up too much time, but we had a composer write a piece for the relationship. Dr. Andrew Boyson, who's a world-renowned composer, he happens to live in New Hampshire, wrote a piece combining some Concord songs and as well as some Japanese folk tunes. We commissioned him to write a piece, which we performed at that concert with him conducting. We invited him to join us on the trip. So that was a really neat experience for everybody involved to have the composer there with us rehearsing and sharing his music. So we won't listen to that, but because I could literally do this for about 5 hours. So because there's so much to share about the concert, about the trip, but we don't have that long. This was our mega band that we did. As you can see, there's about 140 students there. So this was an outreach we did with a program in Hakodate, which is a kind of, if Nanae is like Cambridge, Hakodate is like Boston. So it's a larger city, and it's an all-girls private school called EI Joshi Women's Academy. And their brass band, which is the same as our concert band, is about 100 students, and they had their 10th graders through 12th graders joining us. The 9th graders just started school that week, so they weren't quite ready to get in the ball game. But this was an amazing day, and I think some of the students will talk about that. We got to rehearse doing sectionals and just do like kind of a casual rehearsal with the students. So this was just an amazing day because their kids were so inviting, and they were really nice, and they could really play. They were just amazing musicians. Here's some important people in the relationship. We have Mayor Nakamiya, we have Emi-san, who works in the town office. The mayor has supported this relationship for over 2 decades, and Emi's been a part of it since its inception in 1998. In the middle there is the new band director at Nanae High School, sporting our lovely band sweatshirt. And this was the Tanaka Sensei here on the right with the all-girls EI Joshi brass band. So we made some nice new friends. This was the potluck dinner that they threw for us on our first night. So the kids were very tired and wanted to go to sleep, but we had a long potluck dinner, and the whole town came out. Students met their homestay parents and homestay families, and had a great time. So great trip overall, and I now want to turn it over to some of our students because they can tell you better than I can how the influences and highlights of the trip for them. So we'll start with Liam. This is Liam Mcgowan. He's a senior this year and plays percussion. So he's this year.
Or come
take
take
or come up here.
Or come take a sound. Okay.
You're used to performing,
Okay.
right? Come on.
Should we just bring
Yeah, why don't you all come on
Yes.
up? Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be.
The entire
So-
room is their stage.
Yeah. So I just asked you to share some highlights of the trip.
So one of my favorite highlights of the trip is on the first time that we ended up playing with the Denai High School band, there was this one, I'm not sure what you would call him, assistant to the band. He helped out with percussion. He basically set everything up. And immediately, me and another kid noticed how cool this guy looked. He was wearing the coolest outfit ever. It just looked so awesome. So we spent the entire time talking about who's gonna go up to him and ask him where he gets his clothes. Then he hopped on the drum kit when we were struggling with the Star Spangled Banner just a little bit, and he turned our band of like 5 tempos into one cohesive tempo and sounded great at the drum kit at the same time. So then we started competing over who got to go up to him and ask him what his Facebook was. So I remember we spent the rest of the trip basically asking him questions on like his life. We figured out that he had a kid, that he's been doing drum for a long time. We went to the back room and he taught us a bunch of cool stick tricks to click it together and stuff. We couldn't do it, but it was awesome watching it. And when we left Japan, we figured out that he had made an Instagram account just for us and then followed us first. And then he posted a bunch of pictures of his cats, which made him even cooler. So that's my story from the trip. Everyone kept wanting to talk to everyone else because we wanted to figure out everything about the people in Japan and connect with them. And I didn't just connect with this guy and his cats. I mean, it was with all the students at the high school. And yeah, I think it was really cool that we were able to meet just everyone in the band and make a guy and his kid get an Instagram account because apparently we had such an influence on him.
Did you have any language barriers with the kids?
Oh yeah, he didn't.
With the kids?
I didn't even mention that.
No, with the kids.
Cats.
With the cats.
Oh, cats? Oh yeah. Unfortunately, they only spoke Portuguese. But I didn't even mention that. This guy didn't even speak English. We were just kind of communicating with the words Facebook, cat, and drum. So.
Very nice.
Wow.
This is Alana Alavi, another senior percussionist.
Hi, thank you for having us. So the homestays were a really big and important part for a lot of the trip, I think. So Ella and I actually were together with one family, and it was such an eye-opening experience to be able to kind of dive right into the lives of a family who lives all the way across the world. Our family had 3 kids and a dog, and it was really just a really interesting experience to be able to come home and experience kind of the errands they run. We went grocery shopping, we went to a bookstore with them, then just to experience their day-to-day life, how they get ready in the morning and have traditional meals with them. And it was just such a special experience to be able to meet a whole family all at once and become part of their lives at least for a few days. So that was super important and influential.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's
This is
great.
Ella White, senior clarinetist.
Hi. So my favorite moment from the trip was probably when we had sectionals with the EI Joshi girls, just because we were put in this situation, and while we knew we had to work on a few pieces, it wasn't clear how we were supposed to warm up or how we were going to lead it, because it was really just student-led and there was a language barrier. So at the beginning, there was just this awkward moment where no one knew exactly how are we going to warm up, what are we supposed to do. And so they started to try to take us through their warm-ups, and this girl next to me just tapped me and was overemphasizing exactly what to do with my fingers, so I knew what notes to play, and we kind of slowly figured out we would just start at pieces, and by communicating with the person next to us, we were able to run this entire sectional, and just it was incredible being able to play with such amazing musicians, and I felt extremely welcome since they put in so much effort to make sure that we understood what was going on, and they wanted us to be there. They even gave us goodie bags at the end, which is really nice.
That's great.
Right.
Marissa, who's also a senior clarinetist.
Hi, so I actually stayed with Takaku Sensei, who is the conductor of the EI Joshi school band. So even during times when I wasn't at rehearsal or when I was at home, with the homestay family, a lot of the conversations about music, he was super curious about how we rehearsed, how the pieces we played, different things about me personally as for clarinet, and then just other music that I do, and was always showing me videos. It was just super inspiring to see how amazing these musicians were. And then when we actually got to witness them playing, both at the concert and in the rehearsals, it was just so surreal just to see. They are so dedicated and so talented. They put so much time into their instruments in the rehearsal, and they really love being there. They play so well in tune and so well together. And beyond that, just to see that even though we come from completely different cultures, from different parts of the world, we share a lot with what we do with our music. And when we were able to join them, even though we didn't speak the same language, we were still able to play the same music. And it was just such an amazing experience.
That's great.
Thank you.
We have a freshman that was on the trip last year who's now a sophomore, Lisa Bellotti, clarinetist as well.
Hello. So last year, as Gresco said, as a freshman, I didn't know anyone in the band besides the other freshmen because it was April. And just being put suddenly in the situation where we're just halfway across the world, nothing was our language. We just had to learn how to just communicate and figure out what to do in this world. And I remember one day, it was during a break, one person had bought cup ramen from the convenience store, and he wanted hot water. So we were running around the building during break, looking for hot water, and I remember every time we turned a corner, another person would join us, helping us and trying to find hot water. And I come out of the trip, only knowing other freshmen, maybe like a few clarinets in my section, to knowing nearly everyone in the whole band, just because we just were so tightly knit in this one trip. And I thought that I gained a really strong connection and I joined the band.
Oh, wow.
That's great.
We have Luke, who's a senior trombonist.
Hey, I actually had the experience to meet an exchange student that I would later meet again when I went to Japan last year in October. One of my friends had Aoi, who was an exchange student, and we all walked into town one day and got pizza, and that was a really fun experience. And then the next day, turns out not only was she in band and was she playing with us, but she was playing trombone and she was playing my part. So I was able to help her kind of, oh, Gresco said start there and stuff like that. And that was really cool. And then when we went to Japan, I think the first day before I even met my homestay, I knew someone. We were watching another group rehearse, and there she was whizzing around, because little did I know she was the band president. And it was really cool to, even if there was a language barrier, I had already met someone from there because of this sister city relationship. And there was a lot of pointing, it's like, I know you. Even though we didn't know how to say that properly to each other. It was just really cool to have that relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So to kind of wrap up here, we, although we had out of this world musical experiences, but really it was the other things that made this trip really worth it. My proudest moments were just watching the students trying to communicate and trying to engage, and students that maybe here at school are a little bit reserved and kind of, need a little urging. They didn't need that in Japan. They felt right at home and were walking up to people that they didn't even know and trying to start conversations. So me as their teacher, I was super proud for them being brave and taking on this experience head on. So I told all their parents at our last concert last spring, I wish they were all there to see what their kids did on this trip. It was pretty amazing. And I still get choked up about it because it was just an amazing time, and these students made it worth it. So thank you for having us, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
I would say I don't want you to wrap up so quickly, because I was a little bit involved as a parent in this. I have 2 kids in the band that have been in this trip, so I want to actually emphasize a few things that Mr. Gresco did not. So first of all, it was not only this, but as a part of the trip and the cultural experience, you actually went to Tokyo and did tour Tokyo as well. The other thing is that I know that you had a very large group and you worked extremely hard to actually try and get everybody into homestays. Tell us about this, because that's actually one of the most important cultural moments.
Right, it was pretty impressive. Pretty much almost all of the students that wanted a homestay got one.
That was a stretch.
Yeah, it was a stretch. And it was literally 2 nights before we left. There were some students still getting placed. But it just was a tribute to their community, which is small and was at its limit for what they could do. But they were determined to get homestays for every student that wanted one. So yeah.
And the other thing is that you ran a very successful fundraising. Poinsettias.
Right.
Tell us
Well,
about
we've really been raising money for our scholarship fund for 3 years before this trip. We raised over $40,000 for our scholarship fund, which helped support any student that wanted to go on the trip. So any student that wanted to go could go. So many students were able to take advantage of that offer. So very happy to do that, to make sure they could all go.
And while you're here, I want to take you to another band. If I remember well, you have a strike of many years of gold for the band in Micah, and last year you played in Symphony Hall. Maybe you want to tell us about this as well?
Well, yeah, the concert band in particular has a streak of 25 gold medal ratings at our state concert festival, which is really unmatched in the state for one singular ensemble. So we don't talk about it a lot, but it's just been a standard that's been set that the students reach for every year. And
The kids are like, yeah, we do. It's okay to be proud.
Yeah, you should talk about it a lot.
That's what I'm actually making information out of it.
But we have some really hardworking students in our program, and they showcase it on stage every year. This is my 8th year, and whenever they are up against it, they bring it. Last year for this Japan trip, they prepared 12 pieces for that trip during a time period where we might only prepare 3 or 4 for a normal concert. So they had a lot going on. They always rise to the occasion. But yes, some really great success over the past 25 years for this ensemble. So it's this group that all these students are a part of are really well-respected group around the state. So
Really?
they carry themselves very well. Yes, Liam?
Just something to add to that. While we had Japan trip, at the exact same time period, there was Micah, and then the Symphony Hall, and then also pit orchestra, and then also some solo stuff, right? Yeah, solo ensemble. So this was a period of a month or two with everything.
It was a long day. It was a long day.
And we had 6 members of the boys' tennis team that won the state championship with us for 11 days. They missed 11 days of tennis. Yeah.
So guys, you're very welcome to compensate or overcompensate for Mr. Gresky's humility. So if you want to tell us more things that he's hiding from us, that's the moment.
One that hit orchestra were last year.
Nothing went wrong as far as planning, at all for a minute. We stayed on schedule the whole time, and I know you did a lot of planning, and everything went so smoothly, and we're all very thankful for that.
Wow.
My pleasure.
Also, this was the only school trip I've ever been on where I've gotten 9 hours of sleep and a full day.
Yeah.
It was very well planned with how our day went. There was time with band, time where we were doing group activities, time with our homestay. It was like the perfect ratio of everything. And then we got to sleep on top of it, so we were rested and in good moods. So
Amazing.
Well prepared. I was playing an auxiliary instrument that we couldn't bring to Japan, and every time I go to districts or something, they never had what I needed. They're not if I play bass clarinet, they did not have a bass clarinet stand ready for me. But when I came to Japan, they were immediately ready for me, just with the instrument. Just had it ready, everything. It just sort of baffled me.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, they also I found an issue and they fixed it that day.
I think very accommodating and just so welcoming and helpful. And we showed up to our first rehearsal spot, and there was a Yamaha technician specifically for us. So any repairs that needed to be done, they had a Yamaha certified technician there to fix any instruments. It was pretty cool. So it made us feel really special.
Yeah. Wow.
Can I make 2 quick comments? One is that, we talk a lot here about various definitions of success and various types of opportunities and learning. And I love hearing about an experience like this where, as you said, David, it ties in intellectual, academic, cultural learning, just maturity and growing and, living with another family for a week. All of those, they're such big things. And it's really neat to hear about an experience that ties those all in together, which is incredible. And then I just have to point out, for those of you who did a homestay, I just want to give you a shout out for doing that, because it takes a lot of guts to go and live with another family across the world who you've never met before. And yet it's so eye-opening. And I just want to shout out to all of you who did that. Kudos to you and to all of you for going on this trip and really opening your minds to the cultural exchange, because it can really change the way you think about the world. So well done.
just want to, speaking of shout outs, I want to publicly thank Dr. David Nuremberg for his assistance in planning this trip. Without his help last year, we wouldn't be able to do it. And even though he didn't come with us on the trip, he really laid the foundation to make this a successful trip for us.
And Mr. Gresko, we understand we'll have an adult delegation from an NI here in 1 month's time.
Yep.
That you'll be hosting at the high school for a visit or two.
Yep, here in a few weeks. So we look forward to hosting them, and hopefully there'll be a couple band students with them, as there usually is, and they usually join us for rehearsals, and that's how we keep this connection alive, is through these continuous exchanges. If you ever have a chance to go, please go. It's an amazing trip. I did it as an adult with the Concord delegation a few summers ago, an adult trip, and also with the Sci-Fi Club. It's really one of the best experiences of my life. So go for it if you get offered.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming. That is terrific. Well, thank you all. Just some minutia. Next, we have some minutes. Do you want to run it for a joint meeting? There are minutes. Do you want to take a motion?
Sure. I'll take a motion. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes for the joint committee of August 20th.
27th.
What's that?
And August 27th.
And August 27th.
I second.
I didn't make the motion.
Sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, minor typo. I think on action item C, we will change complement with the letter I to complement with the letter E. We are complementing something.
Yeah.
Just to be fussy.
Good catch.
Good. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I would take a motion to approve the minutes from September 10th from the Concord meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or edits on those?
Question, building a classroom at the Alcott. I think you really meant building a program, did you not?
Sure.
Or no, excuse me, Thorough. It was a reference to building a classroom at the Thorough. And it was building a program.
Build programs at both, so whichever pertains.
Again, just because these are for the historical
Sure.
record, that's all.
So we'll change classroom to program.
Program. Perfect. Then as edited, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, great. The chair and liaison report.
Do you want to do the high school
Oh,
reps
yes,
before
let's
we
do that first,
get into
yes.
our
Absolutely. I want to introduce, we have Amy Tedeschi and Linda Zhu, and they're here from the high school, going to give us a report, and we can trade back and forth. We'd love to hear what's going on from your standpoint.
So coming up this Friday is the Pink Dance, and then this weekend is Sticks for Cancer and the Mighty Moose Run, and all the proceeds from this event go to the Dana-Farber Foundation for breast cancer research.
And on the topic of sports, the Triple E warnings that have been going around Massachusetts have caused us to end our sports by 6. But for our fall sports teams, cross country has so far had 2 meets, and both boys and girls are undefeated. They did have an invitational meet at Amherst College, which is I think one of their first ones, and the freshman boys finished first overall. Freshman girls finished 3rd. JV boys finished 3rd. JV girls finished 1st. Varsity boys finished 2nd, and varsity girls finished 1st. And CC Cross Country was also named the recipient for the Crowley Award for the 3rd year. And for football, they are currently 3-0, which is actually the first time since 2011 when they won state. And our field hockey team is 6-1. Volleyball is 9-0. Boys soccer is 4-1 with a tie and no losses. And golf had their home opener last week and got 115. I personally don't know what that means. Girls soccer is currently 5-1-1. And also, due to the outbreak of Triple E, we no longer have a football game before our Pink Dance, which is what we've had in several years past, just because of, with all the mosquitoes going around Concord, we don't want to have a risk.
And lastly, CCHS Theater just started rehearsal for their fall play, the Laramie Project. And some proceeds from this event will go to the Matthew Shepard Foundation. And performances are November 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. And
I'm gonna get that on my calendar. Wow, that's terrific. Okay, thank you for bringing all that. That's great.
Tell us about the freshmen,
Yeah.
the incoming students. Are they happy?
Yeah, they seem pretty happy.
I mean, I've noticed some changes from the freshmen coming in this year versus myself based on just like new school policies. Like I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that they now have to rent laptops to the school versus when I was a freshman we could have brought in our own. And I think I've heard some people say that they have to use a locker now outside the school because of, for my grade when we were freshmen we mainly just used the locker room lockers, but then with issues with theft, that has been changed for now the incoming freshmen, and I think that's fixed a lot of issues such as theft, but also organization. And I've noticed that they seem to be a lot more put together than I was when I was.
That might be thanks to
that might be just seemingly so.
Yeah.
I say that as a parent.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks for bringing all that to us. And stay as long as you'd like.
Yeah, so I think they're planning on staying. The
Terrific.
Student Senate's asked them to bring back some of our topics, which I think is fantastic. So
that's great.
Stay as long as you'd like, but permission to go when you need to.
I think that's Amy.
Yeah.
Okay, so Amy's going to do that. If you need to go, Linda, you're welcome.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And if we get long-winded and it gets late,
Yeah,
leave whenever
absolutely.
you need to.
All right.
Great. Thank you for bringing all that. Okay, so some quick chair and liaison reports. I will just kick off with a couple quickly and then we'll pass, and then David, if any liaison reports. I'll do just a quick, just from the Concord perspective, middle school update, just because we're not doing a discussion topic on it, but from a Concord side, the middle school project is moving along really well. We recently all agreed on the RFS, which is the request for services that gets published for designers. So that will be being published next week.
By the end of this week.
By the end of this week.
Yeah.
By the end of that's right. It's already this week. By the end of this week, and we should be getting a bunch of designers coming to us. That's the architect who will do the work, and it's moving along really well. So just good progress there. I will also update that I went to, just as a liaison, to the League's Education Committee last week, and it was a great discussion of, kind of keeping each other up to date. They're doing their regular work on, they're helping to organize the Civics Bee again and get students involved there. They're very interested in all that we're doing on the middle school and the other things here, so I kind of kept them updated on what we've been talking about so far. So good discussions there. Do you have a chair's report or anything? The other liaison reports?
I do have a liaison report for the Concord Carlisle Regional School for CPAC, Special Education Parent Advisory Council. They will be having their first board meeting this Thursday, the 26th September, from 12:30 to 2:30. So this is an open invitation to parents and to attend. They will be covering the new exciting events that CPAC is bringing together for the parents this year, and also they will be going over feedback coming from the inclusion forum that Lori, our superintendent, has run.
Terrific. Any other liaison?
In the absence of a Board of Health liaison, I've been asked by Mr. Johnson, Wally Johnson, to report that the governor has put forth if I'm correct, a 4-month ban on certain vaping products to give cities, towns, and schools more time to understand and manage what many would call an epidemic right now.
I've attended yesterday the select board meeting. It was the nicest thing was to hear the town manager actually emphasizing in facilities the place that they decided give to the Concord Middle School as first priority, and the nicest thing about it is that he's actually presenting it as the following the will and of the citizens of the town. It was very nice. And then they discussed other interesting facilities. There was a representative of the school committee of the Minuteman District Technical, which actually, he reported on something else that doesn't have anything to do with us, but it's interesting to know for us, especially now in Concord, that they actually are about to finish their project under budget and a year earlier.
Wow.
And which is, something that we all would like to actually see happening to us. And I think, I'm not sure about the date, but I think on the 27th of October, they have an open house. And I think that would be very interesting for all of us to actually visit, because it really presents us as a top of the line, interesting.
Minuteman Tech.
Thank you.
Great. Sorry, I'm writing that down. Great. Any other liaison reports? Then we
did, Court, you want to report out on the policy?
Sure. The policy subcommittee of this school committee met for its first formative meeting for the year. I think we still have more, organizational work to do. But we did note that some of our policies don't have adoption dates published, so we'd like to make more clear when, in fact, each policy was most recently reviewed and adopted. So this is part of the ongoing effort. There was some consideration, no decision made about whether we would look at all of the undated ones and simply adopt them as a single parcel. We've got another meeting set next week where we're going to have, again, with us Dorothy Presser from MASC, who's been a valuable resource. She was not able to join us last week.
Next week.
So we're going to get some of that sorted out. Please.
Next week.
Is it confirmed?
It's in October, later in October.
I stand corrected. It's
Yeah.
not next week.
22nd, maybe, somewhere that
Made me
way.
nervous.
Sorry about that.
Court's on fast forward here. We're just gonna speed things up to the end of
All
October.
right, sorry, remember Lee, I've had something open up my schedule for next week.
Exactly.
But if I may
About
add to
time.
this, with your permission, Court, so we discussed as well how to go about the revision of the policies. And one of the things that we were discussing is to actually decide on priorities, which means there is a way to go about going past the whole manual, and another way is to actually decide which of the policies are more important, more urgent for us now. And we actually decided to call on all school committee, joint committee members to actually send, through the superintendent, send us a list of things that they feel are to be looked at sooner than later.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely correct. Thank you.
Okay. Great. So you're asking all of us to do that, all of us to send feedback to
Yes.
Lori on
All
any
of us.
policies
And
or
of course-
areas that we think are higher priority
Yes.
that we should look at in terms of policy.
They deserve attention
Okay.
this year.
As you know, we employ or utilize the services of MASC as a policy review. We're not clear because Dorothy was unable to meet with us this time. We're not clear how extensive that oversight is. In other words, we know they have stock policies. Do they do more than just map their stock policies to ours? I don't know. So as Court said, we have more organization to do, and one of those is to include Dorothy in the meeting. She couldn't make that meeting. We thought we would have one anyway, which I think was a good thing because we didn't waste her time. But now that we sort of self-organized, we have questions for her about how extensively we can use their services, not just their policies, but their legal vetting and blah, blah, blah. So the simplest thing is simply to map what they have and what we have and compare and see if there's differences and maybe side with the experience of MASC if that. But then on top of that, we should be doing, I think, two things. One is where there are gaps where we want to have a policy and there may not be a direct map across to an MASC policy. But that's a mechanical thing that we'll do. But more importantly, are there specific issues that are near and dear to people's hearts where we ought to take a closer look and maybe not simply accept a standard policy and make sure it's tweaked. To tweak everything is probably too much labor for the benefit. But to selectively say, okay, these things are really important and they reflect our values, and therefore we want to make sure that we're putting a school committee imprint on them. That's probably important.
And that's why we're actually asking everybody to revise and tell us what they think the priorities are. Probably it's an open invitation to the teachers, to the administration, to actually send us their ideas about priorities.
Okay.
Can I ask for clarification in terms of the policies? Are there different policies for the elementary, middle school versus
Good question.
Very good
high
question.
school? Because you will be seeing different issues and
So I think.
Who's answering this?
I'll give it my best answer. The policies are generally uniform, generally one and the same, Concord Carlisle and Concord. Carlisle is completely independent in terms of how you adopt policies, as you know. But it gets a little trickier in respect to certain things, for example, funding, where a funding-related policy for the Concord Public Schools has to be different than a funding policy for the Concord Carlisle region. So when one goes to our website and then links with the MASC website, we'll see a Concord policy listed. We'll open the link and find indeed there's two policies, Concord followed by Concord Carlisle. So it's not as clear as it could be in this extensive menu of many, many policies in the MASC website. So you and I would have to know that, for example, a financial policy might require a Concord and a Concord Carlisle. And only by diving into it do we see it. And I think it's important for the public to know that as well.
But that was actually one of the things that we discussed when we said we still have some organizations in precisely this. It's not even duality, because Carlisle has got its, and then the K-8 in Concord, and then the regional, and we need to actually find a way to make it more accessible to the public to know which one is what.
For the most part, one and the same, however.
one and the same. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Onward. Is that good? All right, we're on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. Really, my report focuses on just wrapping up our startup to the school year. So the coming reports will be a little more reflective of my goals as we go through those tonight. But I wanted to be sure we all landed in the same place as we've started up. So back to school has been incredibly smooth. I have to say the first few weeks has gone the best of my three. I always need to send great thanks to transportation for that, because they are often, if you've watched the news in the last few weeks, you can see that they're often, if it doesn't go smoothly, it goes very public very quickly. So, and having lived a little bit of that, the work this fall has just been fantastic. So it's been a really smooth opening. I gave you an update here on Mcgowan. I attended a superintendent's meeting with the Mcgowan CEO this week. And as we knew was coming, and as you've probably heard in the press, there are significant changes to the enrollment process. They are weaning off of what literally is a multi-year wait list, where families were enrolling practically upon birth, and switching that over to an annual enrollment. There's a little bit of transition and grandfathering going on. We're still learning what's coming, so we'll be providing more of that. I think it would be great to have Millie, head of Mcgowan, come out to a meeting. Those of you who have met Millie know she's a bundle of energy and loves to be out and about telling the Mcgowan story and advocating. So I think that would be worthwhile coming up, especially with all the changes that are coming. It won't change the day-to-day world here for us in Concord, but the way in which kids get here will change, and I do think that's a really important discussion for us to have. Just in terms of keeping us all on the same page with budget process and meeting dates, we have 2 dates out with the Concord Finance Committee, October 24th and November 22nd. We have 1 date set so far with the Carlisle Finance Committee on October 30th, and those will be in addition to our regular scheduled meetings where we will do budget here before either FinCom sees what we're outlining. So October will be getting up and going. October 30th in Carlisle. Food service, we're really thrilled with our new food service manager, Bryce McKnight. I don't know, the Concord Journal did a nice article on him last week, really highlighting his vision for where we can go with sustainability efforts and fresh food. And the first thing he's done is look at our folks in the kitchens and say, you know, cook. Let's get the recipes out, let's cook. And that's been a really great first step. We're really excited by what he brings. Facilities, very much the same. Our new facility manager, Russ, is really kicking the ground off running and really stabilizing us and finishing up our summer projects, but also the day-to-day pieces. So they've been great additions to the team. And then community and collaboration. I have been out a lot. I made it to all of the back to school nights except Alcott because I was with you. So that's been a great opportunity to be out with families and parents. I've been in classrooms across all the schools at least once, if not twice, and been to a portion of many of the faculty meetings, although the elementary schools all meet at the same time, so that gets a little tricky. But it's been a great start just to be out and around, and you'll hear more of what some of the purposeful efforts to be out will be as I talk on my goals, that some of that visibility will be very focused with intent as well.
Great.
So it's been a great start.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Seems like it. Good, so let's see, correspondence. So we did get, this was actually one that's more to the regional. There was one that came in just today.
Trip one.
Yes,
We
regarding
can
trips.
talk about that at the trip.
We could do that. It did come in as correspondence, but I've also received a request that it be read, but from the center that it be read verbatim in full as a comment here. So we can do it here.
I prefer to do it in the context of trip evaluation.
Okay, we can wait until then. That's fine. I don't think there was I didn't have other Concord correspondence since the last time. Sorry, I'm not speaking into this.
There was one, Court, you had an exchange, I was going through old stuff in preparation this afternoon about goal number 10 and goal number 5. There was some interchange with somebody, you and somebody.
Let me look it up. I don't know, not withholding anything, I don't know offhand. Okay.
I didn't see anything like that as an official correspondence
Maybe
to
it
the
was.
school committee,
No,
but maybe Bart had something. Okay, that's it for that then. Then we will first talk about superintendent's goals, and Lori has put together some thoughts for us to look at.
I have, and I'm going to talk at a high level, so assuming you've had some time with this over the past number of days, we'll go deep anywhere you'd like to. I want to be sure we're time efficient as well. I did do some work in the new rubric, and we haven't made this decision, so if I assume too much, we can roll back and realign it, but looking at the new evaluation rubric that's available for school committees and superintendents, it's a little more condensed and it's a little more targeted, which I think also was really helpful. And just in terms of how things are articulated, it often reflects more of the role I have, which is the work I do through my administrators, not that I'm directly doing it all, but that doesn't mean it's less impactful. So I think that's been some refreshing language that really states the reality of how this position works. So I did highlight a number of elements and indicators from the rubric. We always try to narrow down the breadth of the rubric to some of the focused areas that we're working on. So when you look at my goals, I've tried to align them with the strategic plan and the rubric both, so those references are made throughout. And then I've provided with you both the goals in objective and then some of the action steps and milestones. These always start in one place in September, and much of it holds true, but then I come back to you in January, February, and we tweak where things have changed or where we've slowed down or where we've gone faster. So under student achievement, my focus will highly be on new service delivery models and specialized programs, very focused on student needs and research-based practices, and that'll happen across both special education and regular education, which aligns with our new programming in special education and our RTI work in regular ed. Continuing to look at the horizontal and vertical alignments, that's really the role of the central office team to really be that systemic view. And so we take that very seriously. And then really looking at our screening data and our collection tools, and we continue to talk about what tools are best for the purposes we're serving. Kristen will be able to talk more on that as we get through the year and do some reporting back, but we're always assessing what those tools are providing us, and most importantly, the interventions that we're going to provide as a result. So I outlined what that would look like for you over the year. You'll hear much more as the school improvement plans come to you over the next few weeks. The second one was really focused on the evaluation system, both at the teacher level and at the administrator level. We have really taken a step back from the evaluation process and really rebooted the entire thing. The leadership team has spent an extensive amount of time already through the summer and early part of the fall, focused on the evaluation process, both procedurally and with our intent and our purpose of really developing collaborative relationships with teachers. And that alone is a big discussion point, because if we don't follow through with that intent, then it becomes a compliance task. And we're now staffed, and you'll see trying to maximize our evaluators now that we are fully staffed and have caseloads that are manageable, to do this with integrity and meaning, to really commit to that process. So that's much of what this reflects. And then, I had to really put some onus on myself that I'm going to model that with the administrators. I have been equally as challenged to do more than compliance mode in my evaluations of the leadership. And so I'm committing to that being a purposeful process. We wrote goals today, for example, as a group this morning, and made some team goals, and I'll be working with them in my walks through schools with a lot more purpose and reflection than perhaps has been. We walk, but now it'll be a lot more instructionally focused, just to sort of do that anecdotal gathering of what are we seeing and what do we think in terms of the both innovation, both pick a topic, right? We can change topics every time we go among the different goals that we have as to what we might be anecdotally and informally taking back to us with us from the classrooms. So that's an exciting commitment, because teaching and learning is often very affected by the evaluation system, because it provides the structure, and not because it's punitive or anything other than that. It provides a structure for a lot of rich dialogue, and that's what we want to do. And then the last of the student achievement goals is to encourage risk-taking and increase student engagement. This aligns with our strategic plan goals on innovation and student-centered learning. And really, I see my role as to just spark people this year. We're in the early parts of this discussion, set out you heard my opening statements. Let's take risks, try new things, bring in external resources. We've done some of that already. Be part of Kristen's committees are gonna focus on innovative learning, and you'll hear also social emotional learning. So actually sit in the room with those folks and be part of that really rich teacher dialogue that happens across a K-12, pre-K-12 level. And then just keep it in front of us. Even in my Sunday emails to teachers, just dropping in some new thing. I've always put an article in. I'm trying to be a little more focused on pedagogy or innovation. And I've also invited teachers to send me examples of things they're doing. We've had 1 or 2 of those already that I can share out with everybody, because what I know is they're going to motivate each other more than I'm going to have impact, but giving them the forum for that. So
That's great.
that's just all a lot of fun. Shifting to the professional practice goals, these follow up on ones that we started last year, focused on school safety and sustainability. So I would be reconvening both of those committees, both of which include a wide range of stakeholders. Where we left off with the safety planning is to distribute the updated emergency plan. It is updated, which was overdue. We have an app that we want to roll out for immediate connection with the police in certain situations. So the backside of that is in pretty good shape, and we got to start doing a little bit of piloting work. That'll be a staff-based app. Simple things like, can we all wear our badges in the building? That's harder than it sounds. Like, does everybody have a badge is the starting point. But to me, that's a pretty important visual, so we want to do that. And then there's an entire sustainability action plan, which I won't go through all of, that the Sustainability Committee wrote last year, which extends to things from facilities and how we can do better with our carbon footprint in a big picture way, all the way to the behavioral and habit changing work that we can do both as students and staff and families.
A question, if I might.
Sure.
What's the reasoning behind putting together safety and sustainability? I can imagine the argument, but does it diminish both of them by collapsing them together?
Yeah, I mean, there's all these judgment calls. I sat here, I moved things around a lot. So the way I had framed it last year was under that fourth objective, which is really about the physical learning environment, and to me, they both connected to that, although in different ways. So this is a very condensed version of the work of both of those committees. You could split it up and get further in depth.
Whether they're together or not, I wouldn't want together to, again, have us lose sight of the critical importance of each one of them.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Some of this is just how to present it, so it's not 40 pages long. So,
well, did you mean that to be a bullet or no? Execute.
Which one are you looking at?
Down at the bottom.
Execute.
Oh yeah, that should be a bullet.
That's okay.
If not an exclamation point, because it's the whole sustainability plan.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's probably the confusion.
Thank you. Yeah.
Basically, Lori is doing 100 things at once.
I
She's
know.
just trying to make it easier for us to digest.
Lori, is it a professional practice? This seems
So
more
I
like
debated all of that, too.
operational thing.
Well,
It's important, but it doesn't strike me that it rises to the level of professional practice.
I moved a lot of these around. Some of these are carryovers from last year, and so rather than shift it too much, I left them here because last year we were creating those committees, which I think was a professional practice piece. So I'm open to a lot of feedback on how to wean things off of here and say, well, those are up and running and maybe not goals. I think that'd be a really healthy dialogue, because that's the challenge I had.
But honestly, if we look at the objective to promote a safe school environment where sustainability is a priority, we have a problem. You know, safe school environment, sustainability.
Well, they can be two different objectives.
Sustainability is not a priority when we speak about safety.
I don't think that.
You know, so
That wasn't the way it was intended.
We want to separate.
Yes, that wasn't the way it was intended. I can make that two separate goals. That's totally fine.
They just don't.
Totally
Might be easier to track and then look for ways to connect them systemically.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I do agree with that, but I'm still sort of stuck on what is the definition of professional? To me, your profession is a superintendent.
Right.
You know, a building administrator
Right.
should not. I don't want to
In
downgrade
both of those-
it in its importance of having
Right.
a safe school, but it's a kind of a mechanical thing. Right?
See, I think we're still at a level of climate setting in both of those because we haven't had them as priorities. I think I'm still bringing them up, and you can argue with me. I'm just saying where my mindset was at. I'm still bringing them up to a level of consciousness, very purposefully, in the discussions and the priority that we're giving it as an intent of the districts. So to me, that's still professional practice because both of those weren't really on the radar in terms of actual believing it was important enough to create action plans and to put committees together. And that's where my thinking was at.
So you're saying it's creating mindset as much as creating practices and technical.
And I'm hearing you say it still lives in the leadership camp, not only in the execution and management side of the...
I believe strongly that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, but to go even a level up is still, you know, at the heart of my general dissatisfaction with the superintendent's rubric to begin with. But, you know, we try to stay at an executive level and not dive, you know, go down to operational details. That's what we try to do. And you're an executive and you have the same objective. So, the important thing in security, if from the high level, is, in my opinion, to balance and I don't know, I guess it's maybe the create a learning environment, you know, the welcoming, fostering rich, you know, the first two goals, right, about students coming in, feeling welcome, feeling safe, feeling accepted. And the piece of that is to make sure that they're safe, but don't have to go into lockdown, right? I mean, we don't go to the courthouse and get patted down and the you know, metal detector and all that. So we want, like here, particularly at the high school, right? We want an open campus. We want people free to, you know, go to the fields or whatever. So the objective to me is setting the culture and striking the right balance of that, whether people wear badges, whether there are cameras, whether this or that, that doesn't rise to the level of goal, in my opinion. That's a tactic that we trust. You know, for me, the school committee has to trust that the leadership is leading, and that that the execution of agreed upon, objectives is going to be handled. I don't think it's our job particularly to kind of mind that. We like to hear about it, but I don't think we really have to monitor it in the context of a goal. I think I'd be more comfortable if you said, look, these are the things I want to do. I want to make sure that we bake safety and a feeling of safety, real safety, but also a feeling of safety into daily life here, that people feel secure and that they are secure. And I want them to be mindful that we live in a time where being sustainable is very important. And we should always be mindful of that. Those to me are, they're worthy objectives, and they're consistent with the other objectives of social, emotional, and the general feeling, right? And that's where I would stop. Whether they get badges or don't, I trust you. Yeah, they should wear badges, but that's your business.
If I may just add to what David said, I think that the superintendent goals got, in this context, a double meaning for us. One is for you to define the goals and priorities for this, but this document as well is what we should use at one stage for the evaluation process. And if things are being mixed in a way like here, sustainability is priority in safety, it will be extremely difficult for us to actually be able to evaluate.
Sure.
So it's not. All I'm trying to say, it's not semantics. It's at the end of the day, these are things that at one stage we'll have to go.
I think that makes sense, and I think we've heard Flora. She will separate those. I think it definitely makes sense to separate. I would say let's continue through. But I think some of what's important that's being brought out, especially that Dave just said about what's executive level, what's in the weeds. Let's keep that in mind as we go through. I also want to point out as another filter as we go through the sense that, to Yuval's point about we have to use this to evaluate at the end of the year, there's a lot that Dr. Hunter has on her plate all year. And we want to make sure as we kind of define goals that we're acknowledging the major things also, so that when we go to evaluate, we're not evaluating only on 20% of what she's actually doing. So I think those are kind of the two sides of the scale that we have to balance to some extent.
I don't know, again, and we should ask Dorothy sometime, but it's my understanding that Dorothy Presser, the MASC, our rep, I've had dialogue with at least her Carlisle predecessor, Mike Gilbert. We don't have to evaluate all that much. In other words, again, I don't think it's our job to say, well, where's rubric 1.1? Did you do that? Let's check that out. That's not our job, right? I mean, we have to have an overall assessment of her big picture stuff. If we don't think she can do the operational job, we shouldn't hire her. I don't think there's anybody in this room that doesn't think she can do the operational job. So, let's not waste our time. I mean, let's keep her and ourselves focused at a high level. That's my advice.
And if we accept the deficiencies of the rubric and take their terminology objective, then your statements are at that global level, if you will, that I think David's referring to.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, so sorry.
Sorry. So I just wanted to mention, I actually sat through the charting workshop training for the new school committee members, and a big part of it was going over the new rubric and the new evaluation process. There were a few things that were highlighted throughout the whole presentation, and one of them was to set 4 SMART goals in 3 areas. 4, not more, by the school committee. Because when you become more granular, then getting the information, the metrics of that help you evaluate the superintendent becomes so diluted, it's hard to focus. And to your point, they were going back to the fact that the superintendent has a job and is already doing a lot of the things that we're asking the superintendent to do in the daily routine. So things, even though we might not be aware of it, the things are getting done. So they really wanted to make sure that we do discuss those goals beforehand, and how we are going to monitor that progress, and understand what the actual goal is, and create a year-long agenda with presentation, so we can, so then the superintendent can show through the presentation how those goals are being met. Mm-hmm. But be very specific, so we can really truly see those metrics and really think of an outcomes. What outcomes do we want from the goals that we are setting for our superintendent? So to David's point, if there are too many, then it's, creating an agenda and trying to keep track of it is going to be difficult. And keeping in mind also being able to discuss the evidence. Are we looking at the actual evidence of the goal that we have set up to meet? And our job is really, to focus on that achievement and the wellness plus the budget. So, we will probably have a discussion. I have not been here for the evaluation process from last year, but the new rubric is something to consider. I did sign up for the workshop that is coming up, and there's some more information to go over, because it's a new animal.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. That's really helpful insight from the training, since some of us haven't done it for a few years.
You went last weekend.
I went last weekend,
Okay,
and I'm going to the workshop tomorrow.
Okay, good. Oh, great. Okay, so
Yeah,
Laura,
this is a dialogue, so this is exactly what it should be.
It's great.
Bouncing stuff around.
Yeah,
so that's
makes sense.
That's helpful. The next one is focused on budget. We're continuing the zero base, and you'll hear as we bring you those budgets, even another layer deep. We're zero basing staff this year, which we can talk more on as we bring you the budgets. And you're gonna tell me I mixed too much here together too, because I debated it for a long time myself. The combination of the budget process and then the entire middle school building project. So we need to decide what you think belongs here and what doesn't. Whether it's professional practice, it's certainly a high level of commitment on my part to be helping to co-lead that middle school building team. And certainly noting how much time it will commit. Does it fit in the goals? That was actually a question I was going to pose to all of you. Right. I put those two together just because they're both oriented with, to David's point, kind of budget, fiscal, operational pieces, and yet so much more.
Right.
Because all of our educational work needs to be focused off of both budgets and the building design. So.
Right.
You might want to tease it out as it would just be the Concord School Committee reviewing on that.
Good question. That's why I kind of left it as it was, because I thought it might be dialogue.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's worth dialogue. I think it would be helpful if you go through all of it and then we kind of
hear the big picture.
Yeah, hear the big picture, and then we kind of come back to it to
right.
sift through some of it.
Okay. So then district improvement goals. This one's focused on student well-being. And again, I think this is really setting a stage for the other work that needs to happen around it. So creating a common vision of student wellness, triangulating. We are planning on a climate survey. We just have some work to do on which survey and which tool. We really are craving some updated data across triangulated sets across parents, kids, and teachers. There's some very purposeful tools that we also can use. You'll hear as we get to cultural competency, it'll include questions of that nature, and we can really use data in multiple fashions. Engaging in challenge success, the planning and the process at the middle and high school, especially. Kristen's leading the social emotional learning committee, participating on that, which started yesterday. Student wellness screening tools, we are outlaying in a broader way the tools we piloted last year for social emotional screeners, and doing that more consistently and cohesive across the schools. So we're looking forward to implementing that. Reviewing Open Circle and what it's doing and where we might want to do some complementing of more specific strategies. And then a really high level of support on the reconfiguration of the middle school and the transition efforts at both grades 6 and 9. There's extensive work going on in both schools that we want to be sure we continue to review and talk about and stay in touch with what those plans are.
And Laura, just for Open Circles K-5?
Yes.
Okay. So
yes.
this might be just sort of in there.
So I'll just keep going and then we'll
Yeah,
talk about
there's a lot going on in that area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. I think so. I think that makes sense if you want to keep going, and then we can kind of return to.
Yeah,
all these
and
things.
then the next one's really focused on culture, both inclusivity of multiple types. And last year we really focused on the cultural aspect of this. This time I was far more inclusive. I'm proposing an equity audit that really dives deep into the way in which we operate. Having been exposed to a couple of other districts that have done this, it really collects snapshots of how we do things and ways we say things, and at a whole nother level of depth that really helps us to become more proficient. So I think it would be a very valuable exercise and one that I am looking forward to engaging in. And then the next one is expanding our opportunities for inclusivity of special education students, and that would be much based both on the forum information we got in the last few weeks as well as the survey data that would come in. There's some very specific programs that I am very interested in working with the leadership team to bring in: Best Buddies, Unified Sports, and Special Olympics. I think those three are pretty big missing pieces for us that other schools are really benefiting from, informal partnerships of kids with disabilities and all that. So. And then building connections with the parent groups that work with those kids, both CPAC and Boston as examples, as well as individual relationships as they come up.
Great.
And then the last one really is, again, you can tell me if this is too much of a placeholder, since I think there's some purposeful places we've been trying to work on communication and connection outside of the schools and not just with the parent community. I feel pretty strongly, especially with the new town manager in Concord, I want to really work on the Concord and Carlisle connection. I gave David an example opening the meeting of some communication issues, pretty basic communication issues that we could be doing better at. And then opportunities to engage with stakeholders who don't have students here. I mentioned to the administrators this morning that there's some really easy ways to bring more seniors into our schools and engage with them, and I think that would be a couple of brewing smaller projects, but I think in the large picture there's some easy wins. You know, to have been at that St. Patrick's Day event and just the mutual benefit of the kids being with seniors and the stories, and it's just all really good. So
that's great.
And then this is in the weeds, but since we haven't accomplished it yet, I'm committing to your school committee email list with Erin's help to see if we can actually get that up and running and sustain it, since we have not accomplished that last 2 years.
What's that issue?
Oh, just that we created a subscriber list so that anybody who wants to
join
be
in.
be a subscriber to the school committee information list. We implemented it probably a couple of years ago, but then it
false
fell
starts.
off. Yeah,
And it
exactly.
fell off,
Kind of
and
fell off the radar for a little while.
Erin and I are committed to some habits there that
Yes.
help it get anchored, and then we can decide what else it could be.
What
Because
else?
we haven't been able to get to the real vision because we haven't been able to get even the regular patterns.
Right. But at this point, even if if people are interested in what we're doing, they can subscribe.
Yes.
And we send out agendas and minutes, and they at least get a high level of what we're doing.
Twice, because I subscribed to it through the website when I was a candidate, and actually last week I got my first email.
Yes,
Wonderful.
we're success.
Yes.
We're getting it off and running again. Yes.
I get multiple emails. It's
Good. Yeah, right.
Did you get many subscribers?
There's 300 and some on the list. So it's not a bad start.
That's a good start.
It's a good start.
That's a good start.
That is true.
That's a lot of people.
Once it's up and running, you should definitely
Yes.
make it,
Yes.
you should let the community know.
Exactly.
Right.
It's an
Promote it
existing
more.
resource.
This is pretty good.
It's
very good.
So that's the big picture. I'm really open to feedback. This gets really hard. You're sitting literally by yourself trying to figure out how to format this and what to put to paper. So I'm very open to this being a working document.
Well, I also wanted to point out, just because I know you're working between the rubric that you're trying to fit things into, but then there's also our strategic plan, which basically we've created over the past couple of years, which really is what we've used to give you direction in terms of what we want you to focus on. And so I just kind of want to point out that these, in addition to hitting, areas of the rubric, I think even more importantly, they hit the areas of the strategic plan that we have said are our district priorities overall. And I think we just want to keep that in mind too as we're going through this, that's a big lens for us, not just the standard rubric. Go ahead.
I want to take the opportunity. It's a little it's not, I'm just taking the opportunity, because you're speaking about a relationship, ongoing community structure, and enhanced partnership. It's just an example, but because I wasn't aware of it at all, and I thought that it might be an amazing thing to do, I just want to take advantage of this moment. We've seen in the last meeting of Select Board, we've seen a presentation of the Minuteman Arc. It was really amazing. And I think that if the school will find a way, as community service hours and stuff, to do a collaboration with the Minuteman Arc, I think that would be a great project.
Yeah, Jean, the director, was here this summer and met with me, and I need to get Ruth Gruby connected with her, and we need to decide. I think there's multiple avenues there, both volunteer opportunities, but also services and supports to the special education kids. There's a lot of potential.
More about not the special ed part. I'm actually speaking more about the community as volunteering hours, as meeting, as inclusion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very true.
Great thing to hear about. Other general, go ahead. General comments and questions.
I'm just very pleased that you have this in front of us in essentially the middle of September, so that we've got this to work on early in the year. And I know that your request for dialogue about this is genuine.
It is.
And so I very much appreciate that. What I hope you would be bold and direct with is counsel for us as to where among your goals the school committee could be most helpful in supporting or enabling you or any of these initiatives.
Not to disturb her. Not to disturb her.
That's not an option, I'm sorry.
We didn't give her a do not disturb sign to hang on her door when she got here.
The next part about
just as you have to prioritize every day and every month and make priorities over the year, you can help guide us as to where we can be perhaps more or less attentive on your behalf.
Yeah, I think David's going in the right direction, that if we in this forum stay at the high level ones, I think that's very powerful. One, because that's the rich work of really trying to move a district forward, is moving teaching and learning. That said, there have been some other priorities. I think partly part of the entry is why some of the other things have been here, sustainability and safety, and just some things that did pop as priorities as part of the entry work. And I think I'm happy to agree that ongoing work like that, let's definitely report it out and keep you aware. But the rich dialogue should be about supports to kids, whether it be RTI or special ed or innovative practices and how we try new things and try to maximize the potential we've already started with Rivers and Revolutions and the STEAM lab. Like, we've got some really strong seeds here. I think that's really rich dialogue. Plus then those dialogues are so public. There's nothing, what I've really taken in as I start year 3 here and kind of getting my head out of the trenches, like the power of us spending time on those things and certain things we value as where our meeting time goes, or in a presentation or whatever it is, I think matters greatly. It does set a tone.
Right.
So I think I'm agreeing with some of the direction.
Yes.
Come on.
I apologize, but I actually wanted to comment because David said it before, and you now, that we have to look at the more above and leave the executive. We will get to this, unfortunately, we'll get to this question later on. I just wanted to be clear that all this is true unless the law or the policy is dictating our intervention as school committee and not delegating it, unless we change it. Okay, so.
Well, I mean, let me say 2 things, and I'm not sure I fully got your comment. I mean, it's our job to make sure things don't go wrong, right? Number 1. I mean, the first priority is, if the first priority, maybe the hardest priority of a school committee, is to take action on a superintendent if that superintendent's not serving the district. That's a hard and fortunately very infrequent thing. But some of us have been there. So that, in order to do that properly, we got to have I go to what Eva said. There has to be some evidence, even though I'm really against the granularity of, rubrics and all stuff. There needs to be evidence. I just suggest that the evidence we should try to come up with, or actually ask Lori to come up with meaningful metrics that relate to this. When you talk about social, emotional, student well-being, these are kind of soft things. They're not MCAS scores. So I would say think about ways you can provide evidence of achievement. Now, I painted the bottom picture, which is if it's not working out. But really where we are is up at the top picture, which is how well is it working out? And that's the standard. I think as long as we kind of stay focused at that and we're comfortable that that's happening, I think we're doing our job.
I totally agree. I did not actually explain myself well enough. I'm sure that we will get to it later on, basically.
Okay. Go ahead, Eva, you want to say something?
Yeah, to that point of how that Lori can help us figure out what metrics we can put, how we can sort of see that progression of work being done. And I've seen in your report that you're looking at evaluating how are we doing on your goals in like 6 months and coming. So it will be a working situation here. Having that progression of work and having those metrics, I think, one way of doing that, and one of the things that MASC has emphasized was the presentations that you were talking about, bringing some of the students and the work that is being done at the school. So parents at home and community members at home can see what those goals and what the verbiage truly means in practicality, and we can then maybe we can get a better sense of how those social emotional supports are working for our kids.
Yeah. Does that seem realistic in terms of a way to measure?
Yeah,
That's a hard one to measure.
I tried to start alluding to some of the tools we'll be using to measure. I didn't necessarily set specific targets because in many cases we're creating baselines. But certainly survey data would be one initial measure and set some baseline data there. Numbers of kids receiving certain services, numbers of outplacements. There's, for each, I know I want to measure, and I will give you more specifics as we make our way through the year. I can do that earlier if you'd like and be more detailed than what I referenced here. But I've at least tried to start identifying what the tools are so that we have those opportunities to really assess.
And communication about this will be ongoing. However, in a formal sense, you have a report to us in perhaps January, if I'm correct, and another one in early June.
Yeah.
So we have those
Absolutely.
reporting milestones coming up.
Yes.
Now, just to Eva's point, you were bringing up the recommendation, at least in the training, of 4 SMART goals. Now, that doesn't mean we have to stick to only 4. But I'm going through here, and there are 8 here.
Yep.
And so it begs the question of, does this create more evidence collection than is really necessary? And should we sift through these a little, to David's point, and say, okay, well, what's really important at a high level, and do we consider, I'm not sure, maybe because they brought up the maintenance of safety things and sustainability things, separate and individual, but also under the umbrella of, okay, we're trusting you're managing that, and we're not going to ask for evidence in the middle of the end of the year. So I guess I'm kind of throwing that out as a question to you, Lori, and to anybody in terms of what do we think rises to the top here in terms of our priority level.
Well, I've had a year to watch you in operation from this seat. And if you were to cull some of this, I'd probably try to support it. However, I'm guessing right now you'd be comfortable in reporting on all of these goals.
They're all pretty important.
And in so doing, you keep us informed and you keep the larger community informed. And even if you were to take these off this piece of paper, you would be
You're still gonna do
these-
them.
you would be attending to these as priorities anyway. We can have anything we want on paper, but if we really want to know what you pay attention to, we watch what you do. We watch what you actually pay attention to day by day.
Sure.
And when it's aligned with this and we get good results, then we continue to have the kind of school district David's describing. Do you want to take any of these off?
You know, I think there are some that could come up just in terms of the reporting back to you in such a formal way, and to your point of really baking them into the evaluation process.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there probably are a couple I could call out as a starting point if you wanted to go that way. I am gonna do all the work, but I think it's a matter of the formality and the process and you're gonna go with it, Lori, come and tell us how it went, versus this robust, rich dialogue of how do we as a district leadership really foster and drive something forward.
Yeah, I think that is a good way, and your point about what we spend time talking about here, sending a message is important, because there is that balance. We want to acknowledge all that you're doing. We don't want to just say at the end of the year, you know, again, that we're only talking about 20% of it. But we want to acknowledge all of the things that are going on, and yet not create excess conversation about the ones that don't need it. So
Can we generalize them maybe?
Yeah, but actually, if I may, for a second, I think that we all agree about the goals. We respect what is written here with a little, and I don't think we have to, at this moment, decide or even discuss the evaluation process, because that will be another agenda item. So I actually think that it was a report, and I'm ready to continue.
Well, I mean, we only meet, you know, episodically, right? And she's got to go back and do something. So to help guide you, because we only have this chance, we can't really do it another way. I mean, my feeling is that the evaluation system is to me, kind of sounds like a professional practice. Because what you said makes a lot of sense. And that drills down to you really being a superintendent. That's a professional thing for a superintendent to do, is to run a good evaluation system. And there's a lot there, and I don't want to tie up today, but I'm very interested in how that goes, and do you do 360s and all that kind of stuff. Whereas, as I said earlier, I think the facility-related stuff should be folded into the well-being, environment, all that. And if you figure out a way to do that, then and then, of course, budget, as we've always said, or I do, is always a priority. So if you've got budget, professional practice, and then you've got some stuff with student learning and well-being, I think you're there.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It's a good summary to me. So
I can take that feedback and play with it and bring it back to you in October.
Good.
Okay.
Does that give you enough feedback?
Very much so.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
thank you.
Great.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for bringing those. That's a great discussion. Okay, good. And now, we're moving along. You've brought us an overview of the proposed trips for this year.
Indeed I have.
So thank you for gathering all of this information. And thank you, by the way, to all the teachers out there who've submitted information. And we'll let Lori take us through them.
So I just want to step back from the list you're going to be looking at and just talk time and place on where we are in this whole work of the trips. We've been operating in one mode since I arrived of doing it a certain way. We've had some conversation in this public forum, and certainly some of you individually, in terms of what it feels like and looks like, and some wishes. I just need to state very clearly, there are definitely some areas of work we need to facilitate. There are some logistical pieces that even getting this agenda together today, right up until today, proved to have its challenges. So there's some logistical pieces, but I think there's also policy-related pieces that we've noted. I think too, we know that there's an equity discussion to be had here, the cost of the trips. While we've made a bit of effort to make sure there's more opportunity to address those concerns, we don't have a systemic way that we're doing it. And we need to be sure of that. And we want to be sure that this, I think to the point of what we've been talking about, doesn't become a source of not including kids, but of enriching and creating opportunities. So I think that's the charge in front of us based on the last number of weeks and how we got to bring you this list. the time and place we find ourselves in is that there are trips that would like to occur this year or have plans that need to be made this year for next year. And given that we haven't had the discussion and come to a committee consensus on what parts of that and how we're going to make those changes, it's hard then to kind of stop midstream and revert to what we might wish or want to do when we haven't really defined that yet, and certainly not communicated it out to the teachers who are trying to be really put forward well-intentioned, enriching opportunities for kids that we, I think, want to be supportive of in the most part while we tweak. So the hope I had for tonight, knowing all of that, and knowing there's a lot of work and discussion to be had, the hope for tonight was to look at the proposed list of trips, talk on what you needed to talk on, but I know that the teachers are really hoping for some forward direction here. This is the time of year they start to let kids know what the opportunities are. If there's going to be fundraising, that would need to get going. And each of them might have different ways they manage that. I'm not going to act like I can speak to each and every one because that's part of our problem, right? It's all been left to the individual teachers. Just a little bit of history on sort of what some of these trips are. You've got an actually fairly eclectic list here at this point because we really tried to gather all of the high school trips. So you've got just basic state opportunities and conferences, competitions, things mixed in with exchange programs that have very long-standing traditions, Nanai being the longest, but even Ecuador and Denmark having some, and France having some longevity to them. And then you have some that now look like they're Q5 oriented, and they may have occurred on a vacation or some other time. And then, yes, there are some that are new because in Q5 we've got a new opportunity to consider offering trips. I just want to preface the bit about Q5. This is such a small snapshot of what Q5 is, that the breadth of choice for kids in terms of what they may do back in Concord or more locally is expansive and extensive, and I think that should be some better way. We need to get that information to you in a more thorough way, because this is a really small piece of Q5. It's just the part that, one, you formally approve, and two, has some of the more challenged pieces that we've been talking on to it, where there's so much going on that's just really amazing back locally and within the school. There's lots of kids going out and about all over Massachusetts that I think are getting really fantastic opportunities without having to go to some of these international sites. So that said, one last piece on the equity. We've worked really hard to try to start, and that's been some of the message I've heard from the committee the last 2 years, is trying to make sure there's access for all. The teachers are doing a really great job of really trying to ensure that, all with different methods and strategies. So we've been gathering that data and looking at the last couple of years, and we've had about 11 kids who've had subsidies of small percentages to very large percentages of the trip. You were part of the Sharon Young Scholarship being approved last year. There's about $5,500 in that, which I know when you look at the cost of these trips is a drop in the bucket, but it's something to work within a structure. So we've tried to make some efforts there and try to be sure that the message we send to kids is that if these are of interest and you want to go, we will do everything we can to find a way to have that happen. I understand all the pitfalls and challenges to that. And we can talk more on that as we get to a separate conversation. So the hope was, and the suggestion was, that tonight we focus on these trips. October we have a standalone discussion on, as a committee, what are we hoping for? Where are we trying to go? I think you charged me with a process and procedure to bring back to you is my recommendation, but not when it's in the context of individual trips getting held up within the forum on a timely basis. So that's what I bring tonight. We can talk on any of these individually as you choose. There's a very extensive list here, as you've seen. You've got a lot of backup and detail through your agendas and beyond, actually. So hopefully that's answered a lot of your questions. And I think that's where I open it up for dialogue.
Are there questions? Court.
I have a couple. First, thank you for pulling these together. You're trying to give us as much time as possible so you can give teachers as much time as possible. The biggest question I have relates to our own policies,
right.
Because I want to make sure we're consistent with that. I believe our policy is to suggest that school committee for this kind of trip, well, in fact, let me back up before I get to policy. Let me emphasize again the reference to context.
Mm-hmm.
These are only a handful of very specialized trips.
Mm-hmm.
They don't represent all the trips. They're a fraction.
Yeah, you have formally approved out of state and overnight.
They're a fraction of the trips or opportunities available
Yes.
to students.
Yes.
So I think we need to make that very known. In terms of our policy, it states, if I understand it correctly, that one, we provide quote-unquote initial approval for fundraising, and then the planning process and a preparation process continues with then a little bit more information, in most cases not much because there's a lot of information already here, would come back to us for some final approval. And it would be with that process, initial approval that includes then fundraising that commences, and then a final approval once there's more information about anything that that teacher needs to share. The premise is that we would approve, and it would be rather remarkable if we were not to do so, having given initial approval. Because initial approval means continue with fundraising, but it also means that we're supportive of the idea and want it to work. We want it to work. So question number one is, are we comfortable with this as a policy whereby we would be giving initial approval to any we chose to tonight, with the idea that students and teachers would be doing some work over the coming months to work on this fundraising? And I say that with some concern because I want this fundraising to occur in order to make more opportunities available for more kids, share the costs. But I don't want to impose on students or teachers a huge fundraising obligation either. So this is a very delicate thing we're dealing with. What messages are we going to send here becomes the debate.
Yes.
So I think we need to first be comfortable with agreeing on how to pursue the policy.
And I'll be very frank to say that
later.
we've been very inconsistent in not following the policy. Most of the trips have not had those two phases to them, at least in my 2 years. So that's on all of us, that's the way it happened. So that's just fact at this point.
Yeah.
There's been one or two.
And were we to follow it, I'll say it again, I would only want to follow it with the premise that we intend for this to work.
Right.
I wouldn't want it hanging over a teacher, that there's some
That's
obligation
the
about
concern.
Or that there's a
fundraising.
risk that they'll
You've
fundraise
got to
and then
hit
they're.
target X or target Y. No, it's, has there been a good faith effort to do our best to meet all the competing objectives around these trips?
So are you suggesting that tonight we give these trips initial approval and ask them to go plan and fundraise, and then we come back and do a second approval on these trips? Or are you talking about process?
I'm comfortable with Lori telling us what fundraising did or didn't get done and why. If a given teacher came back and said there was no fundraising because of X, Y, Z, I don't think that means we withdraw the trip. It means Lori knows what they're doing and she's comfortable with it. So I don't think we would want to hold 13 teachers and their prospective students to some
Undefined standard.
undefined obligation that we're imposing on them. No.
That would be a very stressful thing.
It would.
Exactly. So
Can I just-
that's why I'm going to say again, any initial approval has to be on the assumption that we expect and intend to follow through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eva.
Yeah, so, like, I'm looking at this trip situation and the procedures of initial approval for fundraising. You know, when you are running a fundraiser, I don't know how many people have run fundraisers. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, usually not necessarily only kids, but the families, right? So then coming back, so to have the premise that then you come back and you say, well, you did not raise enough money. It just, I don't know if the procedure truly makes sense. Are they supposed to be doing the fundraising a year in advance, knowing what the cost is? I mean, we're looking at trips to Europe. there's a lot of value in going and seeing Auschwitz. And those trips unfortunately won't be cheap. So on the procedure side, maybe it's not the best procedure to ask for initial approval of fundraising and then come back for final approval if you're looking for any sort of input. I mean, if people are putting a lot of work into it, we should be really looking at this a little differently, maybe.
What's the timing? Are these trips in the spring of this year?
Yeah, so if you look at the list, most of them are February through June.
So you don't have time to conditionally approve, right? You gotta start.
I don't really think you do. I don't know that you do.
I mean, we all have spoken before about the need to do better, be more proactive, and you've got that message, but that needs to be a spring activity for next year, right?
Yeah, that's why I'd like to start that conversation on October, so we have months to make that plan, and the teachers by the spring know what is happening based on those discussions.
So what if, as opposed to an initial approval now and another later, if we were to approve the current ones and request of the organizers that they, do some fundraising if possible, do their best to ensure equitable opportunities on these trips,
They can't.
but sorry?
That would be lip service, they can't.
To do their best at fundraising?
To the best, but to ensure equitable, they can't. There's no process for this. There's no transparent, there are no regulations, there's nothing in place. We
Okay,
can
so-
actually ask it, but with all due respect, it's lip service.
Okay, so it's not going to be, so maybe we're not saying create a 100% equitable situation, which maybe we can't, but to just request that organizers do their best at some type of
Well, I think
fundraising.
we have to recognize that we're coming in the middle of a process that's
Exactly.
been going on a long time, and we saw evidence, people love the trips, and they go on the trips, and they have a great experience. So it's not like we gotta put the brakes on it like today, right? But let me finish. And
Sorry.
So I absolutely think we gotta look at it differently, but I just don't think we can do it right now. Whether it's lip service, not lip service, I don't really care. Those trips are going, and we gotta let them happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we really have to do our homework to set up for next year's trips. And we have to back out the clock of where do you have to start? What do you have to do? Where do you have to start? And I'll turn it over to Yuval, but just around this juncture, we should be reading that letter.
Yes, I was gonna do that
So go ahead.
after people. So there's a letter that's a comment on this.
But
And
go
generally, we tend to get our comments. I just wanted to see if anybody else wanted to comment first, and then I will read the public comment. Is that what you were asking me to
As you
do?
probably know, I've got a lot to say. I'm waiting very patiently.
Okay, you've been waiting patiently.
But I think that the letter, we all received it today. I think that this letter at least addresses one of my concerns in a way better, more eloquent than I'll ever be able to express.
Let me read it then. We got a letter today that was a comment regarding this. Excuse me. It says, I am sorry not to join you, but I had an unavoidable work obligation. Thank you for allowing me to speak through this mechanism. I'm the parent of a CCHS student and I'm writing with several observations that I hope you will consider in light of the request to approve the 13 CCHS out-of-state trips for 2019 to 21. I offer these thoughts with the absolute certainty that we are all invested in the well-being of Concord and Carlisle students and of our communities. I believe that the school committees are committed to supporting diversity in our schools. The trouble is that in Concord and Carlisle, diversity is too often used to denote ethnic or religious diversity. I fear we are downplaying socioeconomic variations. It is easy to do. Many so-called ethnic or cultural variations are legible. The color of one's skin, one's accent, one's name, or one's dress may all be seen to signal difference. It is easier to overlook the markers of poverty or economic strain in our school community. In Concord or Carlisle, these are typically less visible. I am not talking about extreme poverty. Excuse me. I'm talking about the economic differences that create greater or less access to opportunity. Some families may live in Concord or Carlisle, but they may not be able to afford Q5 trips that cost many thousands of dollars. I suspect that these trips are terrific and engaging, but they are also often costly. Access to educational experiences should not reify inequality in our community. I know these trips are open to all students and that students and parents are encouraged to seek financial support, but it is never that simple. Some of you may have read the recent New York Times opinion piece by Anthony Abraham Jack that touches on the unseen effects of inequality in education. Jack is an assistant professor at the Graduate School of Education at Harvard. He was also a first-generation college student. His mother is a security guard and his brother works as a janitor at a Miami elementary school. Earlier this year, the Chronicle of Higher Education did a piece on Jack. It read in part, quote, "It's one thing to graduate with a degree from an elite school and another thing to graduate from with the social capital to activate that degree," Jack says. In fact, in many cases, elite schools widen rather than narrow the gulf between the wealthy and the poor, he argues, by making low-income students feel like outsiders who don't actually belong. There was an end quote in there, sorry. We need to do all we can to ensure that our students in our community know that they are integral to our school community. I ask that the school committees please pause and consider carefully the proposal for trips this year, the associated costs, and how that budget is presented. I am concerned that we may inadvertently be fostering greater inequality in our community. I am not sure how best to mitigate these issues, but by and large, this school district is wealthy. I like to imagine that this abundance could make us all more resourceful, both figuratively and literally, in creating educational opportunities for as many students as possible. Thank you for your consideration. So, can I comment quickly? Because I would like to say I think she hits on some points that I think a lot of us, I'll speak on my behalf, that I agree with wholeheartedly and I think are very important for us to all think about. That equity in access is something, we're talking about inclusion, and it is something that we need to think about in terms of trips and everything else. I also think, to Lori's point about process, that this is something that would be very important to discuss, especially next meeting, as we talk about what does this process look like and how are we addressing trips. I also think that this is a discussion not just about international or out-of-state trips, but about opportunities in general. And I think to Lori's part about Q5, and I actually think it's not just Q5, but throughout the school year, there are an incredible number of opportunities for engagement and learning outside of the classroom that don't have to be across an ocean. And I think when we talk about these, I would like us to talk about all of them in a big picture context, not just pulling out individual or traveling opportunities at once, because I think it's important that we look at them all as opportunities and look at equity. So that's my 2 cents on that. I would like to address it in a way that's meaningful, but not necessarily, flip around what we're doing tonight.
Can I just say something about you mentioned different opportunities for kids to have academic experience outside of the classroom. Travel opportunities, they offer a very different. We're talking about the invisible benefits for our kids of health for our children. The travel with classmates offers creates those social bonds that would not be otherwise allowed to happen. Because when you travel together, when you spend time together, you might actually meet people that you would never have opportunity and create those bonds. So from that perspective, if we could hear more about different opportunities, maybe in different price ranges and different having just more of opportunities in different price ranges where there may be much more affordable for different families, but definitely travel gives different set of different experience than just academic outside of academic
definitely.
experience outside of the school.
And I think that's something important for us to all discuss in terms of how we look at opportunities and trips.
In the future.
Yep, in the future. You've been reading. Oh, Cynthia.
Just to make clear, my biggest concern is accessibility. So, and it's those families who have a student come home and say, 3 of my best friends are going on a trip, I'm going, right? No, we can't afford it. What do you mean we can't afford it? So, I mean, that's my concern. And I think we all have the same concern. I don't doubt anybody in this committee doesn't worry about putting stress, on a family or a student because they can't afford the $4,000 trip or even the $2,000 trip. So, I think to Eva's point, I think we just have to have a good mixture of going, to the White Mountains for 5 days. I think there's a similar trip to,
Yes.
can be just as valuable and building relationships with new people, et cetera, as going,
Right, to Europe or somewhere else, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, I just think we have to mix it up, but again, it wasn't clear, we didn't have any kind of guidance for our teachers, our staff, so I can understand.
I agree. What I'm struggling with is how we can make these extraordinary opportunities available to the people you're describing with less stress, without simply moving the stress over to teachers for fundraising and so on, which leads me to a question I don't have an answer to tonight, and that is what can this school committee or this community do beyond the Sharon Young Fund to enable opportunities for students, because somebody's a sophomore or a junior only once going through that high school, and if they think that a week of rock climbing is going to be extraordinary for them, well, it probably will be. If they think a trip to Denmark is going to be extraordinary, I'm sure it will be. So I think we all have work to do around this, because this has been part of the CC culture for a long time, this rich array of opportunities. With who? Who do they get to go on these trips with? Not me, not you. They get to go with their teachers, who are much more gifted than I'll ever be to lead a trip like this. And I know we have a teacher in the audience.
Both our union presidents are here.
And I hope you'll ask the chairs to address us if you think you've got something to add, if we've got any blind spots that we're not trying to heal right now. I am putting you on the spot.
That's right. Feel free if you do have comments.
Maybe with your permission, I'm sitting here very, very quietly against all odds. Because I'm sure that after what I say, you'll have much more to comment. I don't know how to say things quickly and short generally, but in this case, I'm afraid that I need more time. I want to start with 2 clear statements. Those in the community that know me and my family know that I'm extremely committed to travel, to diversity, to the opportunities that travel give that no other in-school activity can give, can actually benefit the student from meeting other people, other communities, other cultures, other languages, art, everything. We travel a lot. Last year, I have twin boys in school. They've been, both of them, to Japan, and then one of them in an exemplary conservation service trip to Ecuador with Miss Sandra Haupt and Miss Sarah Kieselbach. Amazing trips. At the same time, I know that in order to send my 2 kids that are in high school on those amazing trips, I paid over $13,000, which, some of us might think is a very hefty price. There are more families in the district that have more than 1 kid in school. The other thing that I want to very clearly state is that I believe that the teachers are doing an incredible job in preparing those trips, in dedication, I've seen it with Mr. Gresco and the trip to Japan, I've seen it with Ms. Kieselbach and Ms. Haupt with the trip to Ecuador, including hosting in Ms. Haupt's house all the group before, after. Unbelievable. and I'm sure that there's so much more going into in times, in hours, to planning this, and I've got nothing but superlative to actually describe their efforts. I think we have a problem. The more I studied it, and I actually spend a lot of time studying it, the more I have a problem with the process. And the more I have a problem with the suggestion that we will, despite the fact we all know we're in the middle of a process, and that it might be a blow to actually stop it this year before, and then I actually think that we have a problem. And I want to ask actually the superintendent a few questions. So, the superintendent actually told us that she knows we don't have all our ducks in a row about equity and finance, but what do we have? How do we offer today subsidies? What do we have in place? Because I didn't find anything in the website or...
Each teacher's doing that individually. So you heard David Gresco reference his fundraising and he's making those determinations. I know there's other trips that do it other ways. So we don't have a systemic means. It's been left to the individual teachers to decide how that's going to happen, either through the monies they're collecting, and then if the actual trip costs are less, they may redistribute that or ask if some of that can be donated. There's all mixing and matching right now. There is not one way.
So if I'm a parent...
Can I add to what she said though, which is that, and this as a little historical perspective, for several years, those of us who've been on the committee a little while have been asking this very question almost every time a trip came up.
Every time.
One of us would say, this sounds great, and yet it's expensive. Is there a way for kids to get access if they can't afford the whole thing? Bob Grom can back me up on this one. We've been asking this for several years, and because of that, Lori came to us in the spring with the first step. It's not a full solution, as she said, but the first step to address this, which was the scholarship fund. I realize that doesn't answer the whole question, but I just want to add to her answer to show that we have been asking the questions and that some initial steps have been put into place to address it.
Yeah. So, as a parent in the district, I don't have a specific way to actually come and ask for subsidy, which means I have to go to the teacher of my kid or the teacher that organizes it, and the teacher has to find funds, which actually means there is no transparency. There's no clear regulation about who gets and who doesn't and how much. And I wonder whether this is something that the superintendent and the administration can live comfortably with, because it opens a very, a legal issue.
I think I opened my context by saying that we aren't comfortable with it. However, we're in the midstream here of typical process. And I'm going to say this is not a level of concern I've had from this school committee until this fall. So I think we're trying to get to a place where we've got a holding pattern where we can have a bigger picture conversation. I think to do it in the middle of trips that are hoped for this spring, I think is a detriment to the high school opportunities we offer, because we're slowing things down on a dime rather than saying, we know we need to work on this. Let's go with the way we've done this. And I'm going to say the committee's before you, and 4 of you are brand new. The committee's before you. There was always a comment about cost and how are we making it accessible, which I took back every single time. I'm sure you, Mike Mastrullo, will know that. And that was the end of it. And so I think we're into a whole nother level of depth, which by all means I see why and I agree with for the large extent of all of it. I don't want to throw the baby in the bathwater. That's my concern. And I think these teachers have worked really hard to get to this place. Their trips, they have to plan to even get them in front of you. And there are kids fairly geared up to be ready to start enrolling. And I just don't think doing it midstream, even with the parts we're concerned about, and I share most of those same concerns, I just don't think it's the place and time to do it. I feel pretty strongly, and I think you know this because that's why I brought you this list tonight. We need to get this opportunity available for kids as we have in the past and go forward. And then let's have the big conversation starting in October, and we can have it every month till we get it figured out.
I hear you loud and clear. And I don't think we want to send a message to teachers that is a disincentive. I'm not, however, going to expect that we're going to find the perfect solution to this. This is the business of sharing different kinds of pain and different kinds of stress and different kinds of access and doing the best job we can. The collective we, the teachers, the students, the families, the school committee, the community at large. We're not going to have the perfect solution. So are we going to debate it? Yes. Are we going to get a little closer to where we would like to be? We certainly hope so. I think that's the premise of all of these conversations. But if we were to describe perfect, it would be you and I and every student can take advantage of every opportunity going because they're all exceptional and every kid is deserving. But it's not going to happen, unfortunately. So we are going to continue to wrestle with it, and then the question becomes how, because we don't want it to consume us and certainly don't want to bog down teachers in the process.
I just wanted to add that we were looking at a smaller list, and there were probably it was a smaller list because probably those teachers were thinking, oh my gosh, this is a trip that we really have to get ready for, because they were probably the more expensive one. But then the list got expanded, and there is a big number of varieties of trips that the price is not, is not that high. They're not going, they're not flying abroad, or they're going a lot closer. There's the AMC trip, and all of those experiences, I was looking at them, oh my God, I would love to go in 99% of those trips. They're all great. So there is no loss. Yes, so there is no loss. If, and sometimes, you don't go with your best friend, but you go and you meet somebody new. So I think there is a lot of choices, and that conversation that Yuval is bringing is important, because it's you want to make sure that.
But I have one more question, please, to the Superintendent. The administration actually brought a list of 13 trips for our vote. Do you expect us to vote as one item on the 13, or it's one item line each one of them for a vote?
That's the discretion of the committee. A year ago, we brought you 10 trips at this time, and all 10 were voted as one.
So the question is, there are 2 trips on that list that are not for this scholastic year?
Right, and that's because they're exchange trips, so the kids are coming from the other countries this year, and then our kids will go in 21. So
we would need to approve them now, so the kids would come from the other countries?
And all the planning starts happening, the work to go into it. Yeah, I asked all those same questions with the 21 dates attached.
So with the permission of the chair, I am actually going not to stop, but I'm going to actually give all my concerns. Two different concerns. One legal, I'll get to it, and the other is about equity. As the superintendent and Ms. Bauer told us, this question already of equitable and accessibility came to this committee already, I don't know how many years ago, but 2 years ago already, in September 26, in the minutes, in November 28, 2017, we've been in the same place. Mr. Johnson noted the expense of the trip and his concern for creating a set of opportunities for one economic level and unavailable to others. He suggested looking into the structured way. Dr. Hunter stated they are currently discussing the issue. In September 26, we had the same. Ms. Storrs questioned the cost of the trip. I'm jumping any financial support. Dr. Hunter stated that we would look back with Mr. Mastrullo to find out financial support. Dr. Hunter stated that she would follow up with Mr. Mastrullo on the financial support aspects. 2 years later, and we're precisely in the same place. I'm sorry. I want to actually go for the whole thing. At the end of the day, my concern, and it goes to well-being of the students and the families. One of my concerns is, even if we have in place a system, And honestly, I want to take out the teachers out of this equation of what I'm actually saying here, because my complaint is not to the teachers. I think the teachers are doing an exemplary job around those trips and around fundraising and about opportunities. My complaint is to us, to school committee. And for me, there's no previous school committee, a new member. School committee is a legal entity. And my concerns are with our work as school committee. At the end of the day, there are people in this community that really can come and show the need for financial support, poverty, above poverty. But that's not it's part of the concern. But the concern is the larger part of parents who are parents to 1, 2, 3 kids in school. They're teenagers. They come and they say, all our friends are going, or my teacher is going, or this is an amazing trip, or if it's a band trip, so it's like the whole band is going. And parents actually find themselves in a situation in which, in order to actually say no, they have to put the teenager in a position that will point him out as somebody who cannot afford it. We don't have any transparent, I don't even know how to start. To me, it's so obvious that it's wrong that I don't even know how to go about it. And then, if you allow me, I'll go back to the legal, because the legal is much more concerning. I wrote about it to this. We discussed it 2 weeks ago in the Concord School Committee. I've opined about it in open meeting. I wrote to the superintendent asking for legal counsel, but I understand that in order to get legal counsel, it's not enough that I'm actually asking, so I'm actually asking my colleagues here to request legal counsel. But at the end of the day, first of all, we work according to, and this is where I go back, David, to your question about how much do we look above and how much. If the law and if our policy manual is saying that this is something we should check, we should check it.
We should check what?
I'll read it to you.
Yuval, can you do me a favor and try to summarize, but we do have to wrap up this discussion and get to others.
I can't, I'm sorry. No, you cannot put us in a situation, with all due respect, that you want us to approve 13 trips, including many international trips, and the administration says that we have to do it today, and to tell me that we don't have time for the discussion.
I'm not saying we should discuss, just that we all have to.
But I cannot, I'm not an English speaker. I think slowly, and I need my time to actually convey what I need to convey. In the second approval in our policy manual is based on a model policy manual of the state. We have to actually check things in specifics. And it actually clearly says that we have to check all logistical details involving transportation, accommodation arrangement, fundraising efforts. We not actually, by the policy manual, we cannot just give a rubber stamp that covers the whole thing. And we don't do it. We didn't do it in the past. But the fact that we didn't do it in the past doesn't mean that legally we can continue not doing it. And my question, the legal question was, and before I actually continued to speak about it, I wanted to see what other districts are doing. So this here, this document, which I just took Newton, is the field trip guidelines and protocol to teachers, where the school committee and the administration gives them instructions how to prepare a trip and the details needed for a trip for approval.
What's the district?
This is Newton. I have Brookline, and there are others. At the end of the day, my problem is the following. Accidents happen. Accident happens on the way to school, Accident can happen in a school trip of climbing, in a school trip in Europe, in a school trip in Ecuador. If an accident will happen and the district will be sued, the first thing that any litigating attorney will do will go to check if the school committee and the administration was diligent and followed the law in approval process. In a minute, they will see that there was no such process in place. They will sue the district. And this is concerning, but they can actually sue us personally because our liability is protected, we're defended, and the district is protected by waivers and by legal, as long as we legally follow the procedure. If we totally neglect to do it, and we do, if we totally neglect to follow the procedure, to check the specifics, to ask for, it's not the fundraising. The fundraising is one thing. We're actually exposing the district and ourselves. And I don't want to go into the legality, but I've actually checked it a little bit in a document,
Look, Yuval, can I clarify something? Because you're saying the legal process. My understanding was that our legal obligation is actually less than what we have laid out in our policy. That we're following the legal requirements, right? We're not necessarily following our policy, which we should, and we need to address that issue. But isn't there a difference between, I guess, state legal requirements or?
Our policy is based on the state law. Our policy is based on the state law. And our policy is what dictates to us how do we take decision. And that was what I said to David before. If we have a situation in which we have to evaluate the superintendent, we cannot actually evaluate the superintendent according whether people go with tags or without in the school. And I agree totally with David that we should actually try and stay in the kind of executive oversight. But if our policy that is based on the policy of the model of the state requires us to go through a few loops, and we don't, we're negligent in applying it.
Well, it's,
And what I'm actually asking before we get, and I know that it's horrible because it's a last minute and we have to, but I actually think that we should request our legal counsel to actually clarify how do we go about it before we actually approve it.
Unless you do something on purpose, you're covered.
Okay.
And then the other thing is that we bundled here different trips. We bundled here an overnight trip of 8 students to a conference with climbing trips internationally. We have to actually discuss them on them.
In terms of bundling, I think if the committee would like to take 13 votes instead of 1, that's up to us in terms of how we take the votes. We could do that. If
Yeah, but we
everybody
don't have
wants
enough
to.
people.
Well, we have to have a vote on whether we're gonna vote.
We've heard from the superintendent on behalf of the teachers that they need to understand if they can proceed based on the work they've already done. That April, let us say, is right around the corner. I understand that. I would be much more content to hear a motion about the group of trips because these are a distinct group of trips. They are the overnight trips at the high school. They're not the trips, they're the overnight trips that require our level of scrutiny and perhaps a 2-step process per our policy. If we adopt the 2-step policy of an initial approval, it would be contingent upon you to make certain that the teachers understand that's not reservations on our part, that's policy on our part. It doesn't represent anything less than full endorsement. Were we to endorse, were we to approve, we're not there yet. I'd like to turn to a couple of specifics on the premise that we might look at these as a group and just have questions about individual ones.
Let's do that.
I see one that is a trip to Ecuador that would be 15 days in total.
Mm-hmm.
Lori, do you take any measures to ensure that lost time at school is not going to put students at a disadvantage?
And I know this has been brought up at least once in the past where the trip is piggybacked off of a vacation.
So
we
it's
worked
3 days.
really hard with the kids and the staff, and I know there's been mixed sentiments on occasion about kids coming back and there's a week's worth of work to catch up on. I think we can continue to massage that process so that it's manageable. I think it's part of the big picture conversation we
I
need
agree,
to have
but-
about.
So you're comfortable
We're here to
with it,
we will
that,
support them
we can
and-
mitigate the, and you have in the past?
We have and
Fine, okay.
certainly
All
will
right.
continue to.
Got it, okay. David, you've already helped us with one of these, and that is the 2021 trips, where a 2019 approval enables other communities and these
the exchange
exchanges to
part.
understand that these are multi-year undertakings. All right. So I think those were my specifics.
Those were your questions, okay.
Thank you.
I personally, I just wanted to finish what I suggest to my colleagues to do. I suggest that we will ask the superintendent to request for legal advice from our legal counsel about this process and whether I might be right that we are exposing the district and ourselves to a liability risk that we shouldn't do. That's my first thing. I think that we should separate those trips. Personally, I would, despite of really wanting very, very much to approve each one of them, I don't think we're ready as a district to do this. I think we should approve trips like the Japan that followed the 2 steps procedure, that has 20 years of experience that we can actually pick and choose others that will follow those and give them approval. I don't think we can vote about all of them together. I don't think we're ready to vote. I think that we should ask for more details. And I think that we should know, as a district, what are we doing, or a school committee, whether we're doing something that is legally very, very wrong.
I mean, I'm gonna answer a bit of the liability question. We certainly can get legal counsel to give us more input. Anytime we are responsible for kids off-site, we are liable. It's a risk. The last superintendent I worked for would not sanction school-sponsored trips for that very reason. He felt he was putting the school district in a potential situation. There was a workaround to that I think I'm not going to get into because I think it probably was not the way we want to go either.
Mm-hmm.
I will share with you very openly that there have been things that happen when the kids are away. And you have administrators back here in the US on the phone overseas trying to support teachers on site in other countries while navigating with families. And it is a concern. I'm not going to act like it isn't. Whether we've got the dotted I's and T's in the policy or not, there is a liability associated with this. Every time they come back fine, which they continue to, there's a sigh of relief on our parts, those of us who are responsible. So I do think we want to be sure that we all understand that. We can talk on the policy and how protected are the pieces it helps us with and such. But there is a liability to being responsible for kids off-site, just like there is in-state field trips or anywhere else.
Dr. Hunter,
There is insurance, right? Usually.
Right,
that's
so I want to
covered.
preface a little bit of, thank you. When I walked in here 2 years ago, we had trips that were not insured going out. And that was one of the quickest things that I fixed because our insurance provider does not cover trips out of the US. So we've insisted that every trip go through a travel vendor that provides insurance and made sure that that's in place. So there's been some efforts to start cleaning up some of what is a big, long process ahead of us.
Dr. Hunter, with all due respect, I hear you loud and clear, and that's not what I'm talking about. There's no question that there is a liability involved when you send kids to 14 days in off-grid reserves in Ecuador, and I've sent gladly my kid on this trip, which was
that was one I almost didn't even bring to you all because I had me so nervous. Just so you know.
to the district, and I didn't hesitate for a second to send my kid. I don't have any problem with liability. My problem is with liability when we do not follow the legal requirements, because then including your insurance company will throw us to the dogs. Because the insurance company will come and say, we insure you as long as you follow the legal situation. And honestly, I'm not an American attorney, but I've been in those situations many times in my life as a litigating attorney. That's the first thing that any litigated attorney will do, is will actually go to the procedure and see, and if you deviated from the legal requirements of approval, that's a celebration. And your insurance company might actually throw you as well, because they insure you as long as there is no gross negligence. If
we're having a discussion, you know, where we're all partially informed. It's
Yes,
not
I
really
agree.
productive.
I'm asking
So
for-
let me propose. First of all, what's the drop dead, if you will? That's not a good term, I guess. What's the sort of deadline for most of these? Like, how soon do you absolutely need to know?
The teachers were looking to start to put information out to the kids over the next 2 weeks.
Okay. So, and I hate to do this because I don't like meetings, as you know, but, you know, I think a better process is that we set up a special school committee meeting and we take up the trips. And I think in preparation for that, number one, we need to get the council issue addressed and the insurance issue. But more, and I agree with that, but one of the things that I didn't like is we got a hodgepodge of documentation. I would recommend, if we do that, that we ask for the standard form, the one that's filled out. Itinerary to me is less, it's interesting but not important. What's important is how many are going, where are they going, how much it's going to cost, why they're going, you know, what maybe other categories we could think of, like how many years has the similar trip been conducted. I don't know, a few things so we can just take them as a group with a standard metric of whether they're prepared, whether the questions have been answered. Now, we have lots of other questions about equity and about, you know, whether we even should be doing this and all. We'll get to those over the course of the year. But to address the needs of your teachers and our needs, I think we just need a very focused session. Maybe it's an hour, but we got to get the material in advance, and we have to be prepared to look at those trips. And if we want to rule out by exception because we don't think it's well planned, that's a message. But they got to go back and use those week or two to do the homework, make sure it's tidy.
I'll need more clarity on what you don't, I know it came to you in batches that weren't cleanly put together, but I'll need more feedback on what information you don't have, I think, just so I can get it.
Can I add I guess probably neither of you will agree with me maybe, but I want to add another way to potentially look at this. I actually felt like we got a lot of relatively consistent information on these trips. Maybe a couple of them weren't on the same form, but I actually thought the teachers provided information. I felt like I had generally the same information for each trip. Personally, I feel like on the liability side that we have set a precedent. And granted, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not talking legal liability here, but in terms of process, we have set a precedent over many years of how we do this. And it's always been covered. I feel like given the precedent and given that what we have asked teachers for a specific set of information on a form, we have that form, we have the basic information that we've asked for about these trips. They need approval in order to make them happen this year. I absolutely see all of the points about adjusting the process, which I fully agree we should discuss in October. But I would recommend as a next step that we take a vote on them tonight and give the approval to plan them. And then we talk about process in October.
Maybe that's the time to ask. I've stopped you before from actually saying what.
Are there any public comments
I
right
knew that after I speak you'll have more.
So I don't have a prepared statement, but I'd be happy to answer questions. I can answer questions.
Eric, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Eric Pohl. I'm a Spanish teacher at the high school. I'm also president of the Concord Carlisle Teachers Association. I've been leading trips since 1999 at the high school. We've gone to Spain, Peru, and since 2008, Ecuador. And I'm familiar somewhat with the other trips that are being proposed this evening. I can definitely speak to the specifics of the trip that I'm leading, which is the Ecuador exchange. So I'd be happy to answer specific questions about that trip or more general questions about what the process has been or the lack of process over the last 23 years that I've been at the high school.
So actually, your trip to Ecuador, the exchange, is a great example, because looking back to minutes of previous approvals, you actually did follow the two steps stage. You asked for permission to plan, and then you asked for permission for the trip. I thought, I'm doing my homework as well. I should get at least a B-. And this is my problem. When I actually said that at this stage, I'm personally, it's only me personally, ready to go ahead and approve trips that totally follow those, that have experience, that have years of plans, that follow the procedure. I included the trip, the exchange to Ecuador, the Japan trip, the Denmark. But at the end of the day, I would like to ask you how comfortable or uncomfortable you are with the equitable part of what I said, of what many people said here, about the fact that we're creating two standards of opportunities, to those that have and to those that either don't have or don't have enough.
I think you raised some excellent points that need to be discussed. There is an issue around accessibility. From my experience, you never really know how many kids don't ask for financial aid. You don't know how many kids never come forward initially and say, I'd like to go on the trip, but I can't afford it. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you get that information. For our particular trip, again, it's been up to the individual teachers who lead the trips to do what they can for financial aid. We have a separate account in the Student Activities Fund, I think has maybe $4,000 to $5,000 in it presently to offer some financial aid. But again, there are no guidelines. We don't ask for any financial documents. If I tell the parents, if you need help to pay for the trip for your children, then we can help you. And I'll ask them, if we were to pay for half of it, would it make it possible? If we were to give you a $500 grant, would that make it possible? But there are no guidelines. So you're absolutely right that there should be more clarity in how students can apply for financial aid. And that's just the trip that I lead.
Yeah. But that's and here I will ask you, not as a specific teacher, but as the president of the Concord Carlisle Teacher Association. Don't you see a real problem here that a parent should come to a specific teacher and say, I don't have, that there is no central point where you can present documents and stuff? And then the other thing is, how many people will simply not send their kids because they will not go and ask for money?
That's true. Yeah, I think there should be a mechanism. There should be a systemic mechanism through which kids can apply for financial.
So if I can just point out, I think that's a really important thing that we need to discuss, but I think we've emphasized we are going to discuss that at our next meeting in terms of how we address that. Tonight, we do have other things on the agenda, and I think we need to move this along. I think right now we need to decide, what are we going to do tonight? Are we going to take a vote on these trips? And I would love to get, now that we have a couple of suggestions on the table, Yuval's suggestion is put it off and separate them. David's is kind of an intermediate suggestion of have another meeting soon to finish this up. My suggestion is to vote on them. I would love to get the feel of the other members in terms of what you're comfortable doing tonight. Cynthia, Court, Emma, that leaves three of you.
I would be very comfortable supporting the initial planning. One, because it sends a message to the teachers that we would like to see these opportunities. Two, very importantly too, I think one of the points that Yuval has made is it follows our own policy. And to deviate from our own policy is to open us up to a claim that we are not following prescribed methods. And that makes us automatically subject to some criticism, if not worse. Third, it allows us to have the time to do what David is endorsing, which is really drill down on some of this. Don't take the teachers down that avenue with us. This is a school committee obligation, not a teacher obligation, but it gives us time to look at this from a legal perspective, from a fiscal perspective, from a policy perspective, from an equity perspective, but doesn't A, interrupt the planning process, or B, send a message that we are less than supportive of these kinds of efforts. I think we want to be supportive, speaking for myself, I want to be supportive of these kinds of efforts, and I want to protect the school district and every student and every teacher in so doing. I think we've got to do all of the above. I think we have the opportunity to do that and still enable the planning process to go on as a representation of our support and formal approval to do what you want to do tomorrow to move your trip forward.
So
But
just
Court,
to
wouldn't
clarify.
it be a much more onus on the teachers if we tell them today, keep on planning, and then in 2 weeks we get the legal advice saying you cannot do it? I think that if I may try to convince my colleagues to go and do it David's way, because I think that these 2 weeks, I don't know if the superintendent, after she heard everything we had to say, is still so comfortable in saying vote about it now. It's interesting to hear. But David is offering 2 weeks, and you know the big advantage of doing it before the 17th of October is that I will not be here to disturb you. But I think that by now David is offering a great solution. We'll have the legal counsel advice, we'll have some more information for the teacher about the few things that our policy requires, some of the logistics, the educational value, the connection, and you know, we have a couple of excellent examples in our portfolio, like David Nierenberg, like the... So
we will only be perhaps clearer on the legal in 2 weeks. We will not be clearer on the debates we've had for many, many years. And if we're going to do that, we're not going to tidy that up in a 2-week process.
Well, I guess let me ask you a couple questions, Court. So in your two-step process, what do you expect? Say we vote now conditionally, off they go to plan.
Okay.
But what conditions are you imposing, thinking that you would impose?
Good question. Then I think we go with our priorities, which are one, satisfy ourselves that we know everything we need to know about the exposure that we, the collective, we have. Then we bring that information back to the ongoing conversation around equity, access, how these are financed, how these are made available.
But in a practical sense, would we veto a trip that's been planned at that point? We're not going to impose anything that they can't meet, right?
Why not?
Well, then what if we if you've given them the green light to plan, they still not be
the best answer I can give you is the one I gave you an hour ago, which is my hope would be that this initial endorsement is with the expectation that all conditions are going to get met. But if our legal counsel were to say this is reckless on our part, then we apologize to Eric and say, you know what, we wasted your time, but we've got this considerable exposure that exposes you to and your students, therefore we're going to pull back. Word of that magnitude. Okay. Word of that magnitude, I believe, Mr. Paul, you're going to understand it. And I don't think it's going to be of that magnitude, but none of us know. We've got to ask these tough questions.
Mr. Paul, I would like to ask you, do you sense here that the committee doesn't want to approve trips, or that we support trips?
No, my sense is that you overwhelmingly support these opportunities. That's clear.
So I have a suggestion. We have a Concord meeting next week. I'd like to propose that we have it hopefully both of you come to the early part of that meeting and put this back on the agenda. I can have a legal answer for you tomorrow. I'm 99% sure we are totally fine. I can't imagine we've done something for decades that we're not, but I will get that opinion for you. And then I just need a little more clarity if you want more information from the teachers. And I would suggest this be we call a joint meeting for the early part of the night next Tuesday. Tuesday, we're already here for the October 1st. October 1st, and see if we can wrap this into some sort of package. You will not be here, I think, but be sure to let us know what you, we can get more information to you this week.
In length. I think that it would be great if you will.
I can make it later.
I think if you follow David's request and ask the teachers all to present the same document, which means the educational value, the connection to, because at the end of the day, what is our policy is saying that the school committee will also consider the education value of the trip in relation to the cost prior to granting initial approval. We cannot actually sanction fun-only trips. We have to see, and we all understand the cost. So if we actually approve a trip, we have to have a good reason to do it. It's not just because it's fun. Fun is important, don't get me wrong for a second. But there is a form, and the form was developed. And then next year, hopefully this meeting and the next will send a very clear message that before we have our ducks in a row, we're not going to give more approvals in the future. But we're speaking about the solution for this year. I think that and because we have, in those 13 trips, we have, the trips like Dr. Nielberg's in Japan that is following the 2 steps with lots of details and stuff. And we have other trip that says we're going walking in Banff and Jasper. And itinerary is not what we need. We don't approve, this is where we don't come in. We don't approve itinerary. We approve safety, logistics, number of chaperone, price. All we have with those itineraries from Google Drive is itinerary. We get up in the morning, we take a shower, we go to have breakfast. We trust you totally on this part. We're not voting on itinerary.
Okay. So we're going to make part of next week's meeting joint based on your availability?
I can go at the later end.
That's okay.
Not the early end.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Heather and I will loop with you to make that plan. Wally's actually
It's
back.
her birthday.
Yeah, don't do
What a better way to
Then talk about Jasper and the.
So the homework I believe I have, if you don't mind me trying to keep us moving. The homework I think I have by the end of this week for preparation on a meeting on Tuesday is to check with legal counsel and to have every teacher do the same form, which is the more extensive form that I think the Japan trip is on right now.
Oh, it's that one. Okay.
I think so. I guess that's what I'm wanting to just double check that I send you all, get the data you're looking for.
So to be honest, I'm not clear either. So if we're asking for more information, it's not the form that Erin just put up.
So that's the form most of them have been using.
Right. Well, not all of them used it. So everybody should have a form.
And those that used it didn't all fill it out.
And they didn't all fill it out.
Alright, so I'm gonna use this form and have them do it in more depth as needed.
Well, go ahead.
This form.
Yeah.
But in detail.
Well, the detail, I think, it has some good things, chaperoning and nights away cost. I'd like to see a little more rigor around the question, how is the field trip directly related to unit of study?
Right. Yeah.
Is it, those questions, and then yes, no, oh, it's French, okay, great. But, really, let's put some rigor on that. Let's put some thought into it. And I would like to, I agree with some of what Yuval is saying, and I believe we want to start the process of sending a message that there is committee oversight, and we know that you guys are doing the work planning the trip, we know that. But it's not being, sell it to us, pitch us. Pitch us as to why. I've done this for 20 years.
Well, you're gonna have to come back next week.
No, not a presentation. The teachers.
Can I clarify something? Because Court was suggesting that we should take a vote that would be a primary vote that then was followed up by a confirmation vote. So if we're moving this to next week, Is that still the recommendation? Because then I think we start to have an issue with timing and
I don't want to
pushes it
deviate
too
from
late.
our stated policy. I think it adds to our exposure.
Okay, if that's the case, then I would recommend we do an initial approval tonight and we get more information to do the secondary approval next week.
And if there's significant reasons whereby we can't do it, we can't do it.
But that creates the second step. I'm just giving my reasoning
So
for
I
it.
tell you what is the reason.
Yvonne, let me finish, please, and give you my reasoning for it. It's because it follows our policy, so that to some extent addresses the liability issue, or at least part of it. And it creates a way to maintain the precedent and the process that we have and get all of the information that everybody has asked for next week. I think it incorporates both of those.
The two problems that I see with your suggestion, Heather, one is the fact that we always done it like this is not a reason to do it again. With all due respect, I think that I can ask the teachers in the room, but I don't think we want in education to have even this discourse. We do it because we've done it before. That's not really an argumentation, with all due respect. The other thing is, and what if you go your way and we will not approve those trips today initially? We are actually, you're killing the next meeting. You know what I'm actually saying? You're not on safe grounds. That's what I'm trying to say. From what we hear here, you're not on safe grounds. So you want to kill it today before we have a chance to hear more. I don't think it's a good tactic. It won't achieve what they want to achieve.
So just to get a sense of the room.
Yeah, let's get a
There's
sense
no
of
motion on it. We've never had a motion on the
We haven't had a
table.
motion.
So, are we going to move forward with the discussion we just had about having a meeting next week and perhaps?
So I think, do I understand correctly that there's general agreement that we should have a meeting next week? We have a meeting on the 1st. And
We're there anyway. It's just me.
We're there
It's just
anyway.
me
It's just
showing up.
adding you. So next week we'll have a meeting and have a vote then. I think the question is, do we have an initial vote now that gives an initial approval? And then next week becomes a second approval and then we have officially followed our policy.
So can I just ask a question? If we didn't schedule a meeting next week with the follow-up, when would we have had the secondary vote? Would it have been?
I think we would have been back to deciding timing if we needed another meeting like David has suggested, or October 22nd or.
Is policy what? Deliberate then vote? What's the policy you're talking about?
There are two trip policies. One refers to.
I can read it.
Please.
Initial approval by the school committee is required before engaging students in fundraising activities. The school committee will also consider the educational value of the trip in relation to the cost prior to granting initial approval. Overnight trips should offer significant educational benefit to students that clearly justify the time and expense of the trip. Such trip should be appropriate for the grade level. Final approval will not be granted until all preparation for the trip has been completed, included but not limited to all logistical details involving transportation, accommodation arrangement, and fundraising efforts. The school committee requires that final approval be sought no less than...
Tough stuff.
Yeah, that's tough stuff. Do you ever do it that way? Have you ever done it?
Well, the
We never have.
Japan trip and your
So,
trip is
I mean,
done.
I think-
No, just 1 second. The Japan trip is done. When we voted on the Japan trip in May, that was precisely what they asked. They asked permission for initial planning. When Mr. Paul actually offered, not this year actually, but last year, the trip to Ecuador, the exchange was precisely following this protocol.
So
True.
is the
I'm not
Ecuador trip
defending
now
it.
fully planned? Would that be in the final approval stage now? You have an itinerary and all that stuff, so.
Yes, we do. We
Do
have
you
an
qualify for this final approval type? If you already had preliminary approval, is that true? You did, right? You got
No,
preliminary.
this year, no. This year they
I did.
For this year, we do not. So this is what teachers are facing though. They have their counterparts with whom they do the exchange who already have their students.
Okay.
And now we can't even announce the trip to our students. And we've got to get the ball rolling because.
I agree with all that. I think it's the policy that needs to be changed, not.
Right.
You can't, that
Part of
policy's
what's-
not workable.
part
You
of what's
can't have a
coming
trip
is that- right.
that's 90% done and then they have to get final approval.
Actually, it follows the Massachusetts State's model.
Maybe, but it's in
I'm just
practice.
saying, I agree, but we can't do it now.
No, but if we're gonna get council's advice.
Yeah.
Get council's advice on changing that so we can make it workable.
Okay, we just need to figure out a plan and move on here.
I want to give the teachers the running room they need. I think
So
they
make a
deserve
motion.
it. That the Concord Carlisle School Committee votes to, votes initial approval for the 13 CCHS out-of-state trips for the 2019-2021 period with the condition that a signed district liability insurance waiver, MIA, is received from all participants. End of motion.
Is there a second? I would second it. I'm allowed to.
Yes, you are.
Is there further discussion?
Yes, what will happen if we will actually not approve that? If we vote no?
Someone could make another motion.
Okay. So discussion is, I think it's honestly a mistake to bundle them together. I think that they're not the same. They're not the same trips. We have anything from 1 day trip of 8 kids and a chaperone to an uncharted and going through a Nanai trip of 20 years to an uncharted hiking trip that we've got zero information about in Banff and Jasper. Amazing places, believe me, I've been there many times. I don't think we can actually bundle them together. I don't know why you're trying to do it, but I will vote against if this would be the motion.
Okay.
And I really don't want to.
But this is not a final, okay for those trips to go forward. This is
Correct.
just an initial.
An
Yeah,
initial
but this sends the
approval
teacher
plan.
working. That sends a message to all 13 trips that we are actually approving them.
So
If-
can we, so does that preclude the teachers of, if for example, one outfitter, because they have to go through a company, they can't put that trip together because they need to get that insurance certificate. So does that mean that if we are not satisfied with something that the teacher comes back and presents to us, that we can work with the teacher and, maybe change the outfitter that they are using for a particular hiking trip or.
We would
I
make that
think-
known to the superintendent, who would then do whatever she believes is appropriate and bring it back to us. Were this to be approved tonight, I would not feel any obligation to then provide final approval next week. I think we've discussed that we've got a lot of
Oh, no.
work to do. But I would want it to be a strong expression of our support, that we hope that we and they, with all the different pieces of this and all the different parties that have to do work to make this go forward, would in fact be successful. School committee, their bit. Superintendent, her bit. Teachers, their bit. All of them are going to be doing their respective work to move forward. But they can only move forward, to your point, if there's an initial approval consistent with our own policies, or you're not allowed to say anything.
Quote, I must admit that I think that we heard very loud and clear from a teacher and the president of the Teacher Association that they know that we support them. I think that I would urge you to remove this, I don't know if there is a procedure, but to take it off the table, this motion to vote about it now. Because I see only problems with this bundling 13 and voting on them together. But that's my personal.
Okay.
Okay, I think I'm going to exercise my chairmanship, cut off debate, call for a vote. The motion on the table is courts that says vote whether to conditionally approve all 13 trips now with various restrictions or caveats that he has articulated, and noting that final approval has not been granted, and then we have to work forward to figure out what the criteria for final evaluation is, which I don't know right now. But
Will that be clarified at our next?
well, it'll be clarified before final approval. So I think the companion homework is to figure out a process of that, because whatever you've all read is may sound good, but it's not practical. We need a practical working understanding of what constitutes final approval, but we don't have to figure that out tonight.
So I see two things. We need a way to sort of wiggle through this year.
Well, we have to
And
wiggle
then we
through
need
tonight.
to, no, then we need to really put together something that works for next
Well,
year.
no, I would say two different things. Yeah, no, actually, okay, accept what you're saying. Right. But the wiggle through the year itself has some homework beyond tonight, which is.
Yes.
Right, okay, so we agree.
Yeah.
All right, so I'd like to call for a vote. Unless.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just a little unsure of what will happen between an initial approval and final approval. Clearly, I'm the messenger back to the staff, and I'm not clear what
I'm
I'm
not either.
asking for, and I think that's grounds to just create more confusion potentially, unless
Well,
you
we
can-
have a policy we're not following.
Understood.
So I think we have one legal question that's been posed that says, are we liable? And that's
Understood.
easily addressable.
Yeah,
But
that
now
I-
we have a second one which says, okay, what really should be the requirement of a school committee oversight in order to continue to not be liable and to provide the right guidance? So we need to go find that. We don't need to find that out tomorrow, but we gotta work to that. And maybe that has to be the job of the policy committee, to work that policy as one of the ones that you've all requested that we make a priority.
So just, I'm gonna be in the weeds here for a minute, because these folks need to, I'm gonna be the one answering questions tomorrow. If you vote initial approval, are we okay to start talking to kids and making plans and all of that?
Despite the fact we don't have a legal counsel yet.
Well, that, I can
And
have
by the
that
way-
by tomorrow morning. I'm
Yeah, but
In my opinion,
share that
yes.
with you easily.
David, if we're speaking about policy, the one thing I did not read is another piece of the policy says all trips allow student access without regard of family ability to pay, and we don't have this mechanism in place as well.
We clearly need to address all of that.
Lori, may I request, suggest that, because legal advice comes according to the question. So once you get the legal counsel, if you send it to all of us and allow us to ask some further questions. Because we need to see what is the question asked in order to understand what is the answer given.
So by all means, send me what you specifically want asked so that I don't circle too many times on that. I'll be sure to get the answers you want.
Right. And then in terms of the final approval, we're gonna need to establish when we're looking to do that, because it still shouldn't be put off indefinitely.
No, I think next meeting, or starting with next meeting, part of what, Lori was proposing that we start working a new procedure or whatever. And to me, you take those dates on the wall there and you work backwards, depending on the complexity of the trip, and you come up with, hard dates that say we gotta absolutely know these things by this point. And we push it back on the planners and say, come back and tell us.
Right,
But
but it's more than
I'm
about
answering
things,
the question
but
now.
I think let's take the vote, and I think we should shut this down for tonight,
Right.
because it's obviously clearly a very complex and nuanced topic.
Okay.
So, all in favor of Court's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
You're supposed to say nay.
Well,
Then I say the ayes have it.
opposed nay means I do not oppose, no?
Okay. So that motion, so we don't need to meet next week. People can go forth and plan.
Okay.
So now, again, asserting my chairmanship, and it is almost the time we said we would finish. I propose that we drop the new business tonight, because one of those new businesses itself is a very long and tangly concept. And that we think we can get through at least another cut of school committee goals to finish that baby up? It's a question.
It's a question. It's 9:25. If we take a 3-minute break and let everybody breathe, are we up for diving into school committee goals?
What do you want to accomplish with that? To get to the final list, or just work on the things you suggested in your?
Well, I was suggesting that we take that long list and really break it down by categorizing and starting to prioritize. And I think that needs to be done. and we do have a pretty full agenda coming up in October. So I would suggest we at least take a run at it,
Might we
and
do
we
that?
may not end up with a final list tonight.
Might we do that 3 minute and then budget a certain amount of time to
Yes,
work on
I think
this?
that's a good idea.
And is there any problem with us not discussing the capital articles for another month?
No.
Okay.
I think you could put the regional agreement off another month too
Yep,
if you want.
Okay.
So how long, Lori, will the PEG thing take?
That shouldn't be long at all.
Okay, all right. So we don't have much to do. If we could budget 30 minutes and be done, then I'd be okay with that.
Yep, I think
There
that
is
makes sense.
one
Let's do that.
Concord approval here on another trip.
Oh, yes. That will
I
get.
long for the days of the Washington trip.
That's right.
Wait till we start going to the moon.
Yes. Yep, we do
Okay,
have
so we're
a
gonna take a
student
3-minute
thing.
break?
Yes.
We will
So,
take a
3-minute
temporary
break.
adjournment until 9:30.
Okay, see you back here. Ready?
Yep.
Coming back into session. All right, so we are going to have, we said wrap up by 10. We are going to have and we have a few other things to do. So I am going to say we should try to have a 20-minute conversation on goals.
Yes.
So let's back up a step. The last time we were all together, in our workshop, we did kind of a brainstorming session. Listed out our laundry list of things that people were interested in focusing on, learning about, etc. this year. At the Concord meeting, the Concord committee discussed those to have a Concord perspective. So to be clear, we didn't make any decisions, we didn't take anything off the list, obviously, because a lot of them are joint goals. We just discussed things from a Concord perspective. During that meeting, we talked about breaking out some of what we had talked about, some of them being goals, some of them being requests for information, some of them being housekeeping and other things. So I just took some notes and jotted down the categories that we created. This isn't an official document, but I have printouts and I can give them to anyone here, and we have some for us here. Here, you can pass a few that way, and
These are the ones we have, or is it something new?
this is, I don't know if you already have it. It's the categories.
You got it.
Here, come on up. You can hand one to Tom also. Sure.
Thank you.
The two brave souls who we still have as audience members. I'm sorry, Erin, did you get one? Yeah. Okay. Now, before we dive into this, again, these were suggestions to break out some of the things that we talked about. I also want to make sure that we are thinking about this in terms of the big picture. We talked about Lori's goals now a couple of hours ago. And we've talked a lot about the strategic plan. So all of what Lori and we do really should mirror the district priorities, which come out of the strategic plan. And so as we think about these, I want to make sure that we're thinking through that lens of what are the high-level priorities. Eva, you just said that you went to the training and they suggested 4 SMART goals. I'd be curious in a second, if you don't mind, I would love to hear what they might have said, if they said much about school committee goals. And just quickly before that, I want to just kind of high-level what I think we want to do here tonight.
Right.
Which is that right now we have 5 suggested categories, but they all have 5 or 6 things in them. We don't want to be trying to manage 30 different items this year. We do want to be able to, I think, focus on depth over breadth. And I think we need to really look at these and go through them with a fine-tooth comb and say, what is it we want to put our energy into? What are the high priorities?
One other thing I think we need to consider early on as we pick up this conversation is that when this was done, we tried to avoid much discussion about the region because it was a Concord meeting.
Yes, yes.
So we're going to have to now weave in the, shall I call it, the regional column next to the Concord column.
Yep, because these don't.
If you will.
Thank you. I'm going to point that out. Definitely. These do not include the regional only goals. Things like figure out what to do about our warrant articles. So, Eva, did you, as a quick high level from your training, did you have anything that you wanted to share in terms of what they said about school committee goals?
So they said that the biggest school committee goal is focus on achievement and how you're going to measure that, and through the lens of the budget and through the lens of what are the goals for our superintendent as evaluation is superintendent's evaluation is that document that gives you an opportunity to set goals for the school and be able to go back and see some metrics. And really, going back to what you just said, the focus should be the depth of what we are getting in terms of the metrics and assessment of whether the goals were achieved or they were not achieved. So they So the important step for the school committee that was mentioned was to really discuss the artifacts of the evidence, to focus on that as we are setting.
Okay, but that's in the, exactly.
And
exactly.
The big thing was not to have too many goals for the school committee.
Okay.
Up to 8.
Got it.
For the superintendent, up to 8 for us.
Up to 8 for us, okay, which also includes, I think, in general, some yearly things that we always have to do,
Yes.
like budget and.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Okay, so you have these in front of you, maybe I'll just do a quick high level of category suggestions. Again, these are suggestions for discussion. The first we broke out were yearly responsibilities, which are to develop the budget. Again, these are all things that might get weeded out, but there's the superintendent evaluation, policy review, and community engagement and communication. In terms of 1920 specific goals, we brought up for Concord the CMS building project, and for both refining the budget process and budget subcommittee role, that was a suggestion, completing the CTA and CCTA bargaining, establishing deeper community engagement with Carlisle, and beta testing the new superintendent review rubric. The next category was kind of an area of focus, things that should be a lens by which we look at all the things that we do. Cultural proficiency, social emotional well-being, of which a tool could be challenge success, community engagement and communication, inclusion, and civics education. Those were all, again, areas of focus, or at least suggestions. Reports desired, this became a category out of topics that seemed like people were interested in and wanted to hear more about, but that we didn't necessarily think that we had a specific goal that we were trying to achieve as a school committee. So on the Concord side, elementary Spanish, for both special education, RTI, STEAM, and the music program. And then housekeeping was just kind of wrapping up a few things, things that are ongoing. So supporting the administrative onboarding process, the facilities use fees discussion, which we'll bump out a little bit. And that's what we went through. There were also some regional specific things. Excuse me, oops, I don't have that on this sheet. And those were travel and looking at the process for trip reviews. There was a request for information on Q5. There's the parking question, which relates to warrant articles potentially. There's reviewing the regional agreement. There's the athletic fee structure and planning for replacement of turf fields. And there was establish a plan for former landfill and adjacent land. So those all came up as regional specific things.
Sorry, what was the last one?
Oh, establish a plan for formal landfill. Former landfill. Former landfill and adjacent land. Sorry, I'm trying to go so fast.
No, that's fine.
Speaking too fast.
So just a few comments. So some of these 2019, 2020 goals fit into our yearly responsibility. I think developing the FY21 budget would include refining the budget process and budget subcommittee role. I mean, either we're going to use the budget subcommittee or not. I mean, I think that's part of the budget process.
Yep.
So I don't think that's
last year it was a separate one because we did kind of refine the process a bit or change it a bit. But I'm fine with taking that off. I don't think it's a separate goal this year.
As part of, I don't know if you want to put these under the community engagement, of course, establishing deeper community engagement with Carlisle would be part.
Yes, part of community engagement. I agree.
Right.
I
So
think
it's not something like a separate
And
activity.
the superintendent rubric would go under.
Exactly, and that was to use the new superintendent. Now, we're not going to beta test it. It's like we're using it. We got to decide.
That's true.
We can't dip in and halfway through the year decide we're going to switch it.
Yep, and that goes under superintendent evaluation. It's a way we do it. It's not a separate goal.
Right, and so again, areas of prioritization of community engagement and communication could go right back up to the inclusion. So I think things that don't fall under our, legal responsibilities, yearly responsibilities, but they do. So cultural proficiency, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Social and emotional well-being, and then inclusion. And then I don't know where I would put. So those to me are not the same, but they're big themes that that I think, you know, sort of can live together.
Yes.
And then perhaps I would bump down civics education to a report. Just
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That does make sense,
with a
definitely.
Concord and Carlisle lens,
Yep,
kind of a thing.
absolutely.
And then the items that you just read off, I think travel fits under policy. That's where it's got to live, I think, to begin with, and then it can grow out of there. It sounds like Q5 to me might be a report, but other people can comment.
I agree. I was going to suggest the same
And
thing.
then I obviously think we need to, regional agreement I think needs to be on our list.
I actually feel like that's under housekeeping.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a,
Right.
right,
It's a
exactly.
housekeeping,
Yeah.
I think.
It's a housekeeping item.
Hopefully
it's on my-
maybe it's not more than that. but for
Right,
sure.
exactly.
And then the turf, you know, plans for the turf field, I think we always have that in mind. It's just a matter of when.
Right. I don't know.
I mean,
that
it does, well, maybe tie into the parking, and maybe it does not.
Yeah, I actually feel like.
So those are warrant articles, and that would be part of our budget. But I think the capital planning is part of our budget process. It's not a separate process, right?
Well, that's true. We could say develop
Usually
21
it's
budget and capital planning, right? Capital plans.
Yeah. Well, we
Yep.
do that every year.
Right, exactly. But just to clarify that we're doing that and those things fall under
So I don't know
that.
how we want to re-squizzle things, but I don't think we have any, so people can maybe point out where we have an incredibly lofty goal that doesn't seem realistic or doesn't seem, I mean.
Yeah, I think it can make sense. I like all of your suggestions. I think that all makes sense, the moving around that you did here. And then once we do that, I would actually, Lori, I'd like to ask your opinion on a few things, because some of these, I think, as long as we set them aside as, you know, the housekeeping things, if they're realistic housekeeping and we're just kind of setting them aside, okay, we don't have to worry about them as goals or anything. Reports desired, I would like to look at this list, that one especially, with your thoughts, Lori, because that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on here potentially, or 7, that's a lot of reports to be asking you for. And that's the one that I think we might need to say, okay, these are all things that are interesting, but how many reports can we realistically ask for? So that one I would love feedback on.
Okay, maybe one more, just to, how many of these things do or do not fit within your goals, especially the reports?
Exactly.
So if there's like,
Right,
is there really, you know, on my radar that much? Not that I would object, but you know.
Yes.
Right, so
If it's
certainly.
within your goals, let's keep
Yeah, there's some
focusing
easy
on.
ones, SPED and RTI certainly are. STEAM, I think, is worth, I think that's worth a public discussion, just to talk a little more on the lab.
Especially with
and-
Is that a
new
K
STEAM
through 8
lab.
or a K through 12?
It's a K, Kristen would stand here and tell you it's K-12.
Yeah.
So we should talk on the state of the union and STEAM
Okay.
across all the different.
Yeah.
But it's a report. So
It's a report, yeah, that's what we're talking about, is reports that align. So I think the STEAM does align with that innovative goal that
Mhm.
we talked about earlier.
Right.
Spanish isn't a direct alignment, but it's.
Yeah, so that was your your request for it as a,
Certainly.
basically as an update because we implemented it a couple
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
I love the idea. I think it's a
Yeah,
great-
and I want us to be careful. Report doesn't mean we necessarily expect a formal 40-page
No.
written
Yeah, no,
narrative
no.
on something
Right,
with
it might be a,
gobs of data. It means you keep us current and
Sure.
informed on some of these,
Sure.
and we can discuss together how
Makes
it might
sense.
look for a given topic.
Yeah,
yeah.
so I think we can
As a-
play with how we get information to you. Sometimes I can put it in my
In
superintendent's report if I just need a paragraph or two. Sometimes it's a few slides to bring to you, and I think Kristen would probably love to be part of some of those. Just
Yeah.
a lot of these are very academically oriented, which
Yeah.
is
And I think
I have
we
a
would
question.
support that
Yeah, that'd be great.
on the achievement side.
Cynthia suggested Q5 will go to report, and we have it here as review. And my question is, do we even have a saying about Q5? Is it something within our, because when I actually suggested as review, I didn't mean report, I mean review. So
Q5 is a MOA to your last bargained agreement with the CCTA. And there is a trigger in there to review whatever we're gonna define that as, that says we look at it at the end of year 2, which we are at. So there's already a mechanism there that is joint school committee teacher by design.
Good.
To go into that. So clearly, as we go into a bargaining year with them, that's gonna be part of the
So
part
that
of
would
the
be
discussion.
part of the bargaining discussion
It will.
already. So
It
to
will.
some extent, it doesn't have to be broken out as a separate
It
item.
will be part of the
It will be
bargaining
part of the
discussion.
bargaining
I think
discussion.
that's up to you. If it's-
That's one thing. Question is, my question was if, as school committee, do we have a saying about is it curriculum? I want to understand, there's financial issue in the negotiations between school committee and the teachers. But my question is, if we're not happy about the whole thing or the way it's being done, is it within our?
It's all
organization?
bargained. It's all bargained.
Bargained.
I think the answer is it's a bargained item, so you would have to be at the bargaining table for any of these.
And I don't want to get into the weeds,
discussions.
but as far as is it a budget line item or is it not?
It is not, well, no, I'm gonna take that back. We've been scrapping money from a lot of different places as the grants shifted out, so we're still scrapping. There's a little bit of the budget, we've got a little bit in another
So maybe
place
I would
too,
approach it
but
as a
yeah.
discussion during the budget process. You know.
Yeah, it certainly needs to be part of the budget discussion. I don't know that you'll have done the
'Cause I don't wanna-
bargaining part at that point.
No,
so-
I don't want to talk about the details of the curriculum. I just want to be sure.
Leave it for the school year.
It is Q5, so
Yes,
it still
it's
is the
Q5.
school year.
It's still part of the school year, yeah.
So it's
Oh,
not falling
definitely.
away, it's just.
No.
Okay, so.
So this actually, everything that's being said leads me to think that maybe it would be a good report to have at some point, even early in the year, so that as we get into the bargaining, the budgeting, and everything, that we have a feel for what's gone on during Q5, or that we all have.
Yeah, a year
Does
ago
that
we
make
did a bit
sense?
of that.
Yeah.
Mike brought his big slideshow and.
But we're all four of us new.
Yeah, so we can do it again.
Yeah, just since so many of the
It
committees
is a
knew,
unique
that's
program
probably.
that not really many other public schools have, so.
Yeah, it would, even if it's just kind of a review of it for the mostly new committee, to have a high level would probably be great.
And is there an advisory, there is an advisory, right, for Q5 that does all the programming, or was there in the
An
past?
advisor?
Advisory, almost like
A
committee, you mean?
a committee, yeah.
Yes, there
There
was
is,
a
right, so there's
group of teachers that were designated based on the MOA, which obviously we need to get to all of you.
Right.
That then met and created Q5
Memorandum of
and have
understanding.
continued to meet ever since, so.
Part of the contract now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So
we've checked off, the only one that actually two more. So music program, that was a request to hear more. We heard a little more tonight, which was great. That doesn't necessarily cover the whole thing. I think this one,
What's
did
the
this
intent?
one come from you? A request, the music program suggestion?
I suggested this will happen.
So, and so I guess the question is on intent of this. It was on here as,
That's.
it's checked off. Oh, okay.
Oh,
So there we go.
I mean, the Concord School Committee can hear about the middle school because they have a very elaborate,
Right,
and they
okay.
actually come to us and ask for international trips and stuff. It'd be nice to hear what they're doing as well.
Right, okay. So just a little bit of visibility, not a big.
You know, maybe we could say performing arts.
Yeah, but these aren't, we're talking about
Performing
goals,
arts.
these aren't goals.
These are goals, right,
These
this
are
is just.
tactical
Yeah,
things.
but these are not goals,
I would-
or
yeah.
none of them.
So I mean, the
Yeah.
bottom half of this list, I appreciate the reordering, but I would just chop it off as not relevant to tonight. I think.
No, that's,
Right.
yep, that's true.
If you go from
We
the
can-
top, and Cynthia's taxonomy was very helpful, right? So, budget with capital plan, obviously one. Evaluation, I don't know if it's a goal, I guess
You're right.
it's a goal, but it's a
It's
thing we do.
It's a yearly responsibility.
So, setting those two aside, we're seeing a recurring theme about community engagement, however we articulate that, including Carlisle, right? Policy, I actually think is something we're tackling now at a much more, based on one meeting, but I think we're approaching it more systematically now. I think that's probably worthwhile. Because the goal, to me, is we come out with a better policy review process and more robust.
So that would be different, yeah.
That's a goal. That to me is a goal.
Yep.
And that folds into, well, no, I guess so. And then is the contract a goal? Is that something we need by the?
It's responsibility.
Well, it's something we have to do this
Yes.
year, and it's not a year, it's not an every year.
Right.
So I put it under 1920, but
So
we'll
is
call
it-
it whichever.
So
It's
the
this
goal
year.
is to come up with an equitable,
For both
Right.
districts.
well, certainly for our, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't actually care about contract.
I know you.
But yeah. So there.
So it only
and
leaves
then
one,
we're
right?
left with these sort of soft things that tee up to Lori's goals down at your lens stuff, right?
Right.
Cultural, professionally, social, emotional, which I know has come up in our conversation.
Yeah.
Somewhere baked in that is sped. I don't know where that fits exactly,
Yeah.
but.
And
Certainly under the-
I'm gonna say something that, correct me if I'm wrong, is our superintendent at the end of her
Exactly,
contract?
yeah, that's on
Oh,
our list too.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
that would be a good
Oh,
thing
yeah,
to
we
include
didn't-
on
when
here
is that?
too.
June.
So we gotta
Yes.
redo that one.
Correct.
Yes,
So you better
thank
put that
you.
one, you better put that one.
You know, I was
Big capital letters.
I was thinking about that the other day too, and then I forgot to actually add the list.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Okay, so that's the kind of a big one.
yes.
That's the chair does that?
The,
Typically?
um,
The two chairs do it?
Don't look at me, I haven't.
I don't know,
I
I haven't done that part before.
Well,
Well, you
well,
know.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
I think
Or-
the two
You
chairs.
could decide, and then-
I think it's probably, yeah,
And
most
then you bring it to
likely.
the committee.
Yeah, I don't know, they were just wondering what they've done in the past.
Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's true, and it's right.
No, I think the two chairs
Good.
negotiate.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. Okay,
But David, if I can, in a meeting that we had, the Concord meeting, that we actually spoke about this list, when we looked at areas of focus and prioritization lens,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, our idea discussed was to actually focus on those as a lens, kind of an instruction from school committee to the administration of where we see the priorities and importance of the district. We called it a lens because the idea was then to actually request from the administration that many activities will be seen with this lens. For instance, if we speak about travel, we want the travel to actually include,
Right.
you know, cultural proficiency.
Right.
So if we speak about Q5, so the idea is, and actually it will go to what we spoke in policy as well, that we did not update the base credo of the district since 2010, and those things are not there.
The base what? Credo, like
Yeah.
mission statement or whatever?
Mission statement.
okay, so we have, so,
That's actually part of our responsibilities to have a mission statement.
Yeah, so we did review that in the strategic
In the
planning
strategic
process,
plan,
it just
right?
didn't get to the policy manual.
Yeah.
okay. So I think we actually have a pretty good draft here, as David just went through it, and which leaves us with, I was just gonna count again, 1, 2, 3, depends on your, whether you're talking region or Concord, but about 8 or 9 in each. We have 4 that are considered yearly, which is develop budget and capital plans, conduct superintendent evaluation, conduct policy review, and community engagement and communication. There's no verb there, but work on it. And then in terms of 1920 specific goals, for Concord, we have support CMS building. For both, we have complete CTA and CCTA bargaining and renew superintendent contract. And the other ones got moved elsewhere. So it was really only added 2 there, which is 6 total. Now I want to bring back a couple. One of the regional things was the question of parking and what's our recommendation there. It's something we definitely have to talk about. Does it
That's
fall
part of
under
our-
warrant articles and capital plans? Okay.
Yeah, so-
Just want to make sure that we're
Yeah.
including it
Oh, yeah.
somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Juniors would say it's all about inclusion.
Right, exactly.
Yes, they
Yeah, and I think that covers everything. You know, that gives us basically 6 goals for the year with 3, and then the 3 lenses that we're using to look at all of these things: cultural proficiency, social emotional well-being, and inclusion.
Yeah. So I would,
So-
go ahead.
Sorry, so the question is, those lenses, would that mean that we would expect to see presentations on how those things are addressed in a school body? How would you?
My take, go ahead.
I took it a little bit differently. I think what we're doing is informing the superintendent and through her, the district generally, that we're gonna be listening for evidence.
Okay.
That's the way I take it.
Yeah, no,
That we're
exactly.
really have an ear for this.
Weave it in.
Yeah.
Which I think isn't like, oh, we've never thought of these things before.
Right.
But, just to put it a little more like,
Yeah.
this.
And it doesn't mean by end of year you have to give us a big
No.
presentation on cultural proficiency, right? We're just kind of talking about it throughout
That we
the year.
see this throughout
We
the
see
year.
it throughout.
Okay.
That's
that
what
was-
we're looking for in each of our discussions about
That's what I
different
wanted
things.
So I like that. I have two sort of comments, two different ones. I think the policy moves from yearly down to the 1920. In other words, I think if we set it up right,
Okay.
it becomes
Because
a
it's-
better way of doing it. It's a real goal to me. It's like to do
Okay.
it different.
Because it's to
It's just-
refine how we do it. It's
Yeah,
to make a change in what
right.
you're saying.
And
Okay.
And the other question I have, which reflects also a similar situation in Carlisle, is you got a new special services director.
Mm-hmm.
And you're 1 year into your West Ed eval, that was a year ago or something. Does having Ruth come and really vision out the SPED, and is that a goal thing, or is that just the lens again, kind of something we just want to have done?
I think that's under reports desired.
Reports and a lens.
It's in your goals.
And it's in my
Okay.
goals too.
Fair
Right,
enough.
so
All
it's
right.
something
We would
we'll be hearing
expect to
about.
see
Okay.
that.
All right,
happen.
then I'm fine. I'm good with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know I kind of flew through that and I took a bunch of notes. I am happy to
Yep.
make this more clear and send it out to everybody.
Good.
Thank you.
Does that
Thank you.
all feel good? I think
Yeah, I mean, because
that was a relatively productive
That's good.
I hope to hear
conversation.
more about food service. I hope to hear more about
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but not,
Right, and there are lots of things, if things come up that we haven't talked about, that
Oh,
we
yes.
want to hear about,
We hope so.
we know that you will bring it to us.
Okay.
This group is not shy.
Good, very good.
Terrific.
Let's finish.
That was nice and efficient.
Good.
Let's go through the rest of it. Or the rest
Well,
that we're gonna do
skipping-
tonight. We're gonna
yeah.
skip,
Skip regional,
We're going to the action
skip
items, right?
capital. Facility use is just an announcement, right? You just
No, it's
Well,
bigger.
wait.
All right,
We'll
let's
wait
skip
till
it.
October.
let's skip, yeah.
skip.
Yeah.
We've already voted, so we don't vote at number A, we voted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Do you need to vote surplus science books?
yeah,
If
yes,
you
I
let
think
us
we do.
Throw them away so they're out of the way. We would ask.
So
you to
we
vote.
have,
Yes.
Do the
we have
motion.
explanatory text. I move that the Concord Carlisle School Committee vote to surplus high school science textbooks as outlined in the memo from Mr. Vella.
I second.
And if you scroll, the itemized books are there.
There's a link.
Shut down there.
Some physics and earth science books, and a quantity of 273 earth science, 134 physics. They can no longer use, they are outdated, they have been replaced with digital copies, and upon approval, the department and the high school will see if they can be donated.
We'll have the typo. So moved, or second. Did you make the motion? Okay, so second.
Yes. That's in your agency, you'll have to come.
Oh, I call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then we have a revised amendment to the PEG TV studio agreement. So you said that was a quick
Cory
overview.
can probably talk about
Do you
it.
want to
Yeah.
tell
If
us?
you're willing.
I move that the Concord Carlisle School Committee approve the revised amendment to the PEG Television Studio Use Agreement with the town of Concord as indicated.
And the changes that are proposed are in yellow, and they're actually part of the security and safety,
Yeah.
security
So
protocols,
If
which
we get a
is.
second, I think I can
Second.
speak
Great,
quickly to
okay.
that. When we adopted this, when the town took jurisdiction of the studio, then we discussed safety and related concerns. And the agreement was then followed with a memo of understanding, an addendum initially dated Feb 25, 2019, security protocols at the PEG studio, quote unquote. And I think I can claim some responsibility for misunderstanding, and I apologize. There was a notation here that reads, originally, quote, "No members of the public shall be allowed in the studio before 2:30 p.m. on days which school is in session." This was authored by town personnel as a result of our belief that we were not going to have public hours. We didn't mean it to mean that the door would literally be barred to certain people, vendors or a citizen doing a particular production or something like that. So it became known that this was a problem, that we had staff on board, we had citizens known to us who were in the middle of Concord or Carlisle worthy projects who were very hobbled by this policy. And so the assistant town manager worked with Lori, and she suggests that we approve the following addition to that statement or clarification, quote, "With special permission, volunteers will be allowed to edit and create productions in studio during these times, i.e. school hours, provided that they are pre-approved by the PICM." Oh my gosh. We have an acronym here.
Which is so
Aaron, where's that little acronym?
The public information, it's Aaron Stevens, the public information officer who presides over that town department. The public information
Communications manager. I'm making
Thank
it up. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds good.
We know who it is. And the school department designee, i.e. Lori and Mike or their designee. All visitors must have a Minuteman Network employee with them at all times when school is in session, no exceptions, period, end of quote. And we mean this as permission for the staff to make an appointment with an individual and be with that individual during school hours, entering through the separate exit, using the studio specific bathroom, and be very contained in there. It's that simple, and I think our question and to you, Lori, is: are you comfortable with it?
I am.
Okay, I certainly am.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion that the Concord Carlisle School Committee votes to approve the revised amendment to the PEG Television Studio Use Agreement as indicated.
Second.
David, it's yours.
Okay, so I got a couple of questions. I have this June 1 agreement is unsigned by.
So that's just, no, there is a signed agreement.
There is a signed agreement.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Sorry to
item
not
one.
have it in the.
But this agreement says it's 9 says this is the entire agreement, so does that need to be amended to incorporate the addendum?
So if you look what we're gonna do in the original agreement, which it isn't indicated in this one, but it will be, under number, we're gonna add in italics. Kate did it in one of the earlier versions I had that said we're gonna reference the security. So community access under number 3, there's gonna be a small italicized, please see
Okay.
security.
So do we need to
protocols.
get Mr. Crane to sign this now, or?
Well, that's what we're gonna, that's why I didn't bother give you the
Okay.
cleanest
All right.
version. We're gonna have Stephen Crane sign, because he needs to
Sign
get caught
the
up.
master or sign the addendum?
Sign the master, which will then reference the addendum.
Okay, then on the addendum, I mean, we name by name a specific CPS IT employee, Derek Stiles, but yet we're oblique as to the PCIM and school department designee, and so I mean, it's a little inconsistent. I think we should.
Can we?
I don't think we have to be specific about Derek.
Yeah, we can strike that. That's. I don't
A
think.
Can we just say the
CPS
Concord and
IT
then
employee
spell it
has access.
Public,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Well, you definitely have to spell out the acronym someplace.
It is.
I see in an earlier bullet, it's referenced Aaron Stevens, public information and communications.
Well, we shouldn't have specific people. We should just have the
Precisely,
role.
we should have the role.
But the
So either put
acronyms,
that acronym up
the
above, so when
acronyms
I
need
search
to
it,
be
I can
shared.
find out what the heck it is.
and then just again in the spirit of court booth here, channeling court, prior to the highlighted, shouldn't it be on days when school is in session?
Yes.
Yeah,
Those are my comments. Any further discussion?
So I just want to amend my motion edited or amended or however they appropriate.
So, as amended, what we're doing is taking care of the when for the which, and we are using titles. Is that
Exactly.
our understanding?
And
Yes.
and acronyms need to be
Spell
identified.
that.
Thank you. Got it. Okay.
And it's the
By titles,
understanding
that's what I
that,
meant, job titles, yes.
right,
thank
and it's, the understanding is the governing agreement will reference it, which you're taking care of.
you. Perfect.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I would like a motion to adjourn.
Oh,
Wait.
The region can adjourn.
Well, the region can
Yes.
adjourn, then we have CMS.
I'd like a motion to adjourn the region.
So moved for the region.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Region's adjourned.
Okay, Concord, I need you to stay here. We have one more.
I'm getting out before they change their mind.
I know. Okay, we were gonna try to be out by 10. It's 10:08. Ready? Can we do this fast? We have a
No,
no. Maybe.
and I don't appreciate it.
Only 'cause
I guess my
speaking to
request
you.
would be, I mean, it's pretty well laid out here,
Yes.
that the middle school
Opening
band
area.
has revisited their trip based on what we postponed last time.
Uh-huh.
I know the concerns, I don't know that we need to say them all again. I would ask you to just vote if you're not ready to say so, and we'll push it or vote it down. It speaks for itself, so it's really your decision tonight, given that it's 10:08.
Yep.
The trip does, my only question would be, you just said you're asking us to vote it, or if not, that we wouldn't, but the timing is such that in order for the trip to go, does it need to be approved tonight?
It's the same discussion we just
Same,
had,
okay.
that if they're gonna get going, they would
They need to
need
get
to
going.
get going.
Okay, got it.
Right. If we're discussing it, I want this teacher to have the running room necessary to flesh this out further, and are we to approve the trip on an initial basis? It doesn't foreclose close consideration later on. It assumes, in my opinion, that we want it to work, but it's not our our assurance that it's gonna work, because we simply don't know. But it's our expectation.
Can I suggest that we make a motion and then have discussion? Would
Yes.
you like to make this basically the same or a similar motion
I
to what
move
you
that
did
the
earlier? and we
Concord
can-
School Committee votes initial approval for the CMS Select Ensembles and French Department Canada performance trip to Quebec City and Montreal, Canada from May 1, 2020 to May 5, 2020 with the condition of assigned district liability insurance waiver, MIIA, is received from all participants.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Yes, I would like to actually point out that this is a very different approval to the approval that we actually were asked in Q5 trips. Q5 trips is voluntary, which means if they sell a trip to a specific audience that can choose to actually go or not. In this case, it's the music department, which actually means that we're going back to the question of accessibility and equitability, which we don't have in the district. We don't have any mechanism that will promise any type of transparency in financial aid, which I think is extremely wrong. In this case, you can actually, I think that we can even see the problem in the forum, because in the forum they actually say number of participants between 100 and 150. They know precisely how many kids they have in the music program. Such a discrepancy just shows that they actually expect many people to opt out because of the financial burden. Some of these people are the same people that will have to send their kids to Washington. So we just approved the $1,100 plus expenses to Washington. This is $1,500. So some of the families that have 1 or 2 or 3 kids are actually looking at, $3,000 to $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000. Everyone that will not go on this trip will be pointed out, in middle school as somebody that the parents choose not to afford or cannot afford. I think that this trip as offered now is infinitely better than the original thing that was offered to us and was taken off the agenda last time. It has much more cultural value to it, much more educational value, but I still think that we are not in a stage in the district that we should actually burden families with this decision, and we don't have in place a way to actually promise equal opportunities to the district, to the kids. So I would
Okay. Just a quick question, Laura, because we usually say with trips like this, financial aid is available. Is there still there is an opportunity to provide financial aid, correct?
There is.
Okay.
I'm not going to pretend I have all the details,
All the details
because
of how much,
we've
right.
done this conversation.
Right,
There isn't
exactly.
a systemic plan. It's
Right.
going to be up to these guys until we get a better
Right.
set of options.
So it is not you've also pointed it is not a clear, transparent,
No, don't make it
process.
nicer than it is. It's not transparent at all. I didn't say it's not clear transparent. It's totally not transparent. But the other question here, once again, we're speaking about a group of 150 kids. Where do we have the money to actually support even?
There's going to be fundraising. There's a Concord Music Association group that's formed and is currently fundraising.
So maybe we suggest the Concord committee is meeting next week. Maybe we suggest that we will invite somebody from the administration, the Mr. Nosser, somebody to actually give us some more details before we vote about the fundraising opportunity and equal opportunities to families. And then
So I would say, I mean, that's for the committee to decide. I have heard about this music, the Parents Association, I forget exactly what it's called, Concord Parents Music. Concord Association of Music Parents. I think if they are fundraising, that's gonna help a lot.
should be presented to the committee. We cannot actually rely on what we've heard.
Actually, I've invited them. They might be coming either to the next meeting or a following one. I'm not sure which one. I do feel like, again, I feel like we need to give, at the very least, the initial approval so that the teachers can start to plan this and plan that fundraising. But that's my opinion.
Right. I mean, I have to.
I want to hear from Cynthia and Court, and then we can take a vote.
No, and I you know, it is a great trip, but again, it's, you know, for the family with 2 people in band and an 8th grader, not just all, I mean, I know they're not paying it in that month, the same month, and they're probably paying it over payments. That's usually the way these things go. But I think we have to be highly cognizant and relay to the teachers and to the families that we understand this is a lot, and we're working on trying to find a transparent mechanism where you feel comfortable, and then we do have the funds and so forth and so on. So we're working on it to make it clear that we're not just cavalierly assuming that, you know, it's not a problem for some
I think that's
families.
a really good point. The communication is critical.
Right.
This is going to be a painful vote for me. And I think you've all said it very well. I'll put it a little bit differently. This trip and the Washington 8th grade trip do not look and feel as elective to me as do all the high school ones. They simply don't. Therefore, the higher expectation that you're part of a known group that will also do this trip has perhaps greater unfortunate social consequences for the students who can't or won't do it. So again, if I support it, it's going to be painful, and if I don't support it, it's going to be painful for different reasons.
And I feel like we've already proved the Washington trip.
And I wish I was confident, Cynthia, that this school committee could do something significant and meaningful around defraying the costs of these and making it more accessible to more kids. I just don't think this committee is a lot smarter than last year's committee or the one before. We've been wrestling with this stuff for a long, long time.
Well, yeah.
And we want these exceptional special opportunities, but they come with these built-in problems every time around access. And so we're going to have to accept some degree of shared pain, how much we're willing to expect a family might bear.
Or less expensive opportunities.
How much of a different kind of pain we would expect a possible student to bear, socially or otherwise. How much pain the district is going to take on, and what mechanisms do we have to do that.
Or going forward, we
We
say we
don't
can't accept
have
a
easy
trip
answers to this, so we can
more
say
expensive
that,
than 800.
we can say this is a great concern and a priority of ours. I wish I had a lot of confidence that we're going to make a real dent
No,
in
it's
this problem.
pulling a rabbit out of a hat.
May I suggest, because of what I hear my colleagues, I know how I tend to vote, that once again, the motion was on the table already. I don't know what's the procedure to withdraw it, but maybe we should actually delay it for 1 week instead of voting now, not clear vote, and hear from Mr. Nossi and Mr. Alpeni how do they suggest to help in fundraising. And maybe that would make the decision and the vote easier. All of you know me. I'm an avid supporter of the music program, much more than many other programs. But I see a problem, and maybe we want to. I lament. I didn't say anything about it before, but I lamented the fact that Mr. Mastrullo was not here to answer a question about fundraising. But maybe this is a chance to give Mr. Nossi and Mr. Alpeni, that are extremely dedicated and involved in it, a chance to actually convince us that there will be more of an equitable process.
But if their best effort, and I believe what they put on paper here, if their best effort is this will have a cost to a student before fundraising of $1,499, that implies that, or in fact expresses that they're going to do some good fundraising. I expect they will. Notwithstanding that effort that they promise us, they still say, to your point, we still don't know if it's closer to 100 or 150. So their best effort still gives us this access problem. So if we call them in front of us next week, all they're going to do is verify that they're going to knock themselves out and still try to be a good music teacher on the side while they're doing fundraising.
Knock it down to $1,350.
And exactly. So yeah. I wish I had confidence that their visit here would change a darn thing. I just don't think it will, sad to say.
Yeah, I must admit, sorry.
I think it is a big picture question, and I think we are all in agreement that we would like it to be more accessible than it is. I completely agree with all that. I also think, and I've said it a lot, but I also think it is an issue that can be better addressed and more effectively addressed over the long term. That at this point, if we're to try to fix that issue right here, we're not going to be able to fix it or have an answer next week. I think it's a question of, are we going to enable this opportunity for this year and ask them to do their best on fundraising, or are we not? That to me, it comes down to that question. So in terms of Yuval's suggestion was put the vote off a week. How do you both feel about that? Or are you?
I think Court's correct. It's not going
to change much next week.
Much more accessible.
So
and
it's
they'll
a
work
question
really
of
hard. I know we're not doubting their dedication to trying to do the fundraising.
Right, exactly.
It's still important. I'm not saying forget it. Just don't do that. But for some people, it's still not going to be enough.
Right.
Let's be honest about that.
Yeah.
But on the same time, honestly, in spite of what I said before, and I believe in every word I said, considering the fact that this school committee just approved point blank without having enough detail 13 other trips, I see the difference in this one, but I think that the result, if we vote against this one, will be very difficult. So
I agree.
At the end of the day, I don't know. But if you decide to vote, I would like a roll call, please.
That's fine.
Sure.
Okay, are you both comfortable voting?
Mm-hmm.
I know you're not comfortable voting. Are you comfortable enough for tonight voting?
ready to
Or do you want to add anything before?
No.
Okay, we know. We know what Lori thinks on this.
I will note one more thing, if I might.
Absolutely.
And that is that in spite of their best efforts, and I have great faith in these teachers, I know that sounds just like rhetoric, but I think people know it's true. I do have a lot of faith in these teachers. Nonetheless, there is a lot still to be sorted out about this trip, hoped for engagements, and so on, which is unfortunate. Even the words here, we are hoping to schedule this, and we will also include some of this.
Sure.
And we have options that include some of this. So regrettably, because of the haste that they had to operate under because of our calendar, our calendar and their calendar is trying to work together. Some of this stuff is.
Do we make a motion?
Yes, and in fact, Court's motion addresses that because you actually made the motion
We're discussing
as
the motion.
the initial
Yeah.
approval, so it would still need a final approval.
Okay.
So I mean, personally, I feel that regardless of these issues that I also agree with and we would like to address, I still feel that it's important that we let them provide the opportunity and that we ask for great fundraising efforts and we do our best to help everybody who needs help.
I call the question.
Yes. Okay, then I'm gonna ask for a vote by roll call. So it'll start at that end.
Cynthia, aye.
Early abstain.
Abstain? Okay.
Booth, nay.
Bow, aye. So it's 2 to 1.
Yep.
So the vote passes, the ayes have it. And this, as initial approval. So this trip, that's what I was about to say, this trip has initial approval. And just like the others, we still have to give it a final approval. But they can start talking about it to families and students and planning in more detail.
Okay.
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 Thank you all. Is there anything else before we call for adjournment? Then I would take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry, too late. We're adjourned.